4 centuries ago, humanity had reached the pinnacle of civilization and prosperity. However, with this development came darkness that began to infiltrate deep into the human soul. Good values were gradually eroded by deceit, hatred, and mutual suspicion. These negative emotions did not remain merely psychological, but transformed into dark entities, forming a terrifying creature carrying profound resentment toward mankind. This dark entity hatched an evil plan, using the power of darkness to drag all of humanity into the abyss of extinction. Amid the chaotic darkness of this turbulent period, a dragon-shaped creature appeared. No one knew where it came from, only that its presence prevented the fierce battle between humans and the forces of darkness. The battle between humans and the dark forces was fierce, with countless lives lost and the continent reduced to ruins. Finally, the mysterious creature defeated the dark entity, ending the fierce conflict. The legend of this battle was passed down through generations, becoming a symbol of hope. However, over time, these miraculous stories were gradually forgotten, existing only in faded fairy tales, far from reality. Time passed, and 4 centuries after this legendary event, the continent of Metallicana became a peaceful place where kingdoms thrived. However, this peace did not last long. One day, the kingdom of Metallicana, the center of the continent, was suddenly attacked by a vicious army of demons. An atmosphere of terror enveloped everywhere from the palace to the remote villages. The demons were not merely wild creatures. They possessed extremely powerful magic, making the kingdom's elite army unable to hold out for long. In the panic, the high ministers quickly realized that this attacking force had a close connection with a dark wizard. It was said that this wizard had once spread terror across the continent many years ago, and now it seemed he had returned. As the enemy approached the kingdom's final line of defense, the situation became extremely tense. With no other option, the surviving soldiers immediately sent an urgent message to Princess Zayla, who bore the responsibility of protecting the kingdom. In this moment of danger, the survival of Metallicana depended on the last hope, the only person capable of saving the kingdom from imminent destruction. Yoko, the daughter of the high priest, who held the secret of a special incantation. The spell that Yoko possessed was not ordinary magic. It carried the power to release a mighty entity sealed within Lucian, a seemingly harmless boy. Few knew that Lucian was the embodiment of one of the most fearsome dark wizards to ever exist, Dark Schneider. Lucian's second personality, when released, could become the kingdom's most powerful weapon in the fight against the demons. Time was pressing, and everyone in the kingdom placed their hopes on Yoko. If the spell was successfully performed, Dark Schneider would awaken and help them defeat the enemy. However, the awakening of the second personality in Lucian was not simply a matter of releasing a powerful wizard. Dark Schneider, who had been sealed by the high priest himself, carried resentment and hatred toward all who had betrayed him. Therefore, releasing Dark Schneider posed a significant risk. No one could be certain whether he would agree to help or turn against the kingdom as the Dark Wizard had done in the past. As Yoko prepared to perform the ritual, the entire kingdom remained in chaos. The demons continuously attacked villages, destroying everything humans had built. The kingdom's army, despite their best efforts, could not stand against the overwhelming power of their opponents. Brave warriors fell one by one, leaving the despairing faces of the people in desperation. With each passing second, the dark clouds in the sky grew thicker, signaling the presence of a dark force drawing ever closer. Tension and fear invaded every corner of the kingdom. All of Metallicana stood on the brink of collapse, and the only hope remained in Yoko's hands. As the demons drew closer, they slaughtered all the soldiers in the castle without mercy. In a life-or-death moment, Lucian bravely stood up to protect Yoko from an attack by a giant monster. But the price was a severe wound that made him collapse. Reluctantly, Yoko decided to use the incantation to release the power within Lucian. To succeed, she not only needed to perform the spell in the name of the goddess of beauty, but also had to give Lucian a kiss. The kiss of a virgin became the essential key to summoning the legendary wizard. When the kiss took place, Lucian transformed from a weak boy into a grown man with extraordinary power. With a powerful wave of his hand, Dark Schneider quickly defeated 2 giant demons, unleashing unimaginable destruction. However, instead of focusing on eliminating all enemies, Schneider's only goal was to protect Yoko. Seeing his selfish attitude, Yoko couldn't contain her anger and condemned Schneider's thoughtless actions. She mocked his indifference toward those around him. In the end, after being scolded, Dark Schneider realized his mistake and agreed to help the kingdom, determined to fight against the demons. First, Dark Schneider summoned the Sodom technique to sweep away the rampaging demons. The powerful magical explosion from this technique left the monsters with no chance to resist. After eliminating the minions, Schneider continued to cast spells, a dominating magic that caused the leader of the demons to suffer a similar fate. With a wave of his hand, all enemies were defeated in the blink of an eye, leaving only dark fragments. As soon as the battle ended, Schneider immediately left the castle, not forgetting to carry out his grand ambition. His goal was not just to rescue Yoko, but also to take revenge on the high priest who had sealed him for the past 15 years. The plan was not simply revenge. His scheme also aimed to ignite a great war and conquer the entire world. However, just as he began to implement his plan, an unexpected situation occurred. In a moment of impulse, Schneider kissed Yoko, an action that re-established the seal once more. As a result, Lucian returned to the form of a weak boy, losing his power and all the grand goals he had just set forth. This situation not only placed Lucian in a difficult state, but also posed new challenges for his future. Upon receiving news of the appearance of a wizard capable of casting the Venom spell, the Dark Rebellion immediately dispatched Successor Dungo, a summoner of the Hydra Serpent, into battle. The goal was to test whether this newly appeared wizard was truly as powerful as the rumors spreading everywhere suggested. With a cautious nature, the rebellion forces could not ignore any opportunity to verify the identity and actual abilities of the wizard who was gradually becoming a major threat. A few days later, Yoko and Lucian discovered an unusual sign. Thick black clouds were gradually enveloping the entire kingdom, signaling impending calamity. The premonition of looming danger made both of them anxious. The situation became more serious when the high priest summoned them both to the palace. He emphasized that, in the worst case, they would have to awaken the Dark Wizard's second personality once again to be able to resist the force that was gradually approaching. Meanwhile, surviving soldiers from the neighboring kingdom of Rudas quickly sent information to the king of Metallicana, warning of a massive army of demons advancing rapidly toward his kingdom. The signals collected left no doubt about the threat gradually descending. This army of demons was not only numerous, but also carried cruelty, sowing death everywhere. High Priest Jiosu also warned that the appearance of black clouds was not random. He explained that it was a sign of increasing demonic energy from the darkness, a phenomenon that only occurs when evil forces gather strength. He even feared that this was a harbinger of the resurrection of the evil god Anslac, a brutal entity that had once nearly destroyed the entire world in the past. Meanwhile, Successor Dungo and the Hydra Serpent he summoned had passed through the eastern main gate of Metallicana, bringing destruction and panic everywhere. Walking through each area, bodies piled up, and screams of agony echoed through the streets. Yet nothing could stop the rage of this ferocious summoner. The people, even if they begged for forgiveness, received no mercy from that monster. The situation became critical, and the high priest immediately ordered his daughter to quickly release Schneider before Successor Dungo could reach the castle. He understood that only the power of the Dark Wizard was capable of repelling the attacking demon army. Everyone anxiously waited, hoping for the return of the one who could save the kingdom from the terrible outbreak. However, when the Dark Wizard was summoned, things did not go as expected. As soon as he appeared, he immediately refused to help, extinguishing the hope of the entire kingdom in the blink of an eye. Not stopping there, the wizard also nurtured the intention of taking revenge on the high priest, who had sealed him for the past 15 years. The deep-seated resentment turned him into a greater danger than the demon army approaching. Yoko, angered by this betrayal, immediately stood up to confront the wizard. Despite her attempts to awaken dignity and reason in the mind of the powerful one, she could not calm the rising hatred. Determined to carry out his revenge, the Dark Wizard shouted a spell that caused lightning from the sky to strike directly at the High Priest. Just before the imminent destruction, light from the shield cast by the High Priest created a solid protective wall, completely dissolving the power of the attack. Blocked by the magical shield, the hateful one began to think of another approach. Seeing the High Priest standing firmly before him, the wizard realized that using magic was no longer effective and decided to switch to hand-to-hand combat. He believed that his physical strength and fighting skills would bring victory. However, the memory of the High Priest's magical proficiency and his fighting ability as a master martial artist made him reconsider. Aware that direct confrontation could lead to significant risks, the wizard had to abandon that idea. When the idea of summoning a golem that he had used in the battle 15 years ago came to mind, Schneider decided to act immediately. In a moment of impulse, he cut his hand, using his blood to form a magical conduit to help this powerful creature be reborn. After completing the ritual, the Dark Wizard ordered the golem to attack the High Priest without hesitation. The situation became more tense when Successor Dungo suddenly appeared, intervening in the battle between Dark Schneider and the Prime Minister. This action ignited the Dark Wizard's anger. With his power, Dark Schneider immediately controlled the golem, breaking the Hydra's neck in an instant, demonstrating superior strength. Right after, a powerful punch was thrown directly at Successor Dungo's face, causing him to fall. Dark Schneider's anger did not stop there. He continued to use the Venom spell, a powerful magic to eliminate Successor Dungo in a heartbeat. After eliminating the enemy, he turned back to face the Prime Minister, who did not want to witness his father being killed. Yoko, the High Priest's daughter, quickly ran to Dark Schneider, hoping to prevent any harm that might occur. The elf girl was named Sarah Greenwood, and the cat girl Loli was named James Gaylor. In this moment, he tried to explain that he was actually Lucian, only different in face, personality, physique, and power. Moreover, the love that Lucian had for others was also the love that Dark Schneider had for them. Seeing Yoko's doubt, emotions surged, and Dark Schneider acted impulsively. He kissed Yoko himself, hoping that this action would help her recognize the truth. In the blink of an eye, the form of the Dark Wizard changed, and he returned to the form of the innocent boy Lucian. In the gloomy context of the world, as darkness spread everywhere, people realized that Dark Schneider, the possessor of the powerful Venom spell, was the kingdom's only hope. However, a new danger appeared when Gara, one of the 4 heavenly kings of the rebel army and also a calculating ninja master, decided to intervene in the battle. Gara, who had once followed Dark Schneider in devastating conquests, now returned with ambitions of domination. After defeating Kevin Guzzo, dark clouds came and covered the entire sky, blocking even the sunlight, creating a suffocating nightmarish atmosphere. The High Priest, with his understanding of mysterious seals, revealed that there were 4 sacred seals that had imprisoned Anslac, a divine creature with unimaginable power. 4 ancient royal lineages were responsible for protecting these seals. However, when the first seal of the Judas royal family was broken by the rebel army, Anslac awakened after a long sleep in a sealed state. Since then, the mysterious black clouds have covered the entire land, bringing fear that the legendary creature is returning. Kasu, the leader of the Anslac Resurrection Society, was not only the head of the 4 heavenly kings, but also a devoted disciple of Dark Schneider. The High Priest once described Kasu's magical power as no less than that of the Dark Wizard. As threats from the rebel army became increasingly clear, the kingdom's high ministers tried to persuade Yoko to release the seal on Lucian's body, who carried Dark Schneider's soul, because only Dark Schneider had the ability to face the dark forces threatening everything. However, Yoko firmly refused, fearing that releasing the seal would turn Lon into a tool for the court. Moreover, she was also afraid of the embarrassment of having to activate the seal by kissing in front of everyone, and above all, because she had deep feelings for Lucian. While the battle was taking place outside, Gara and his ninja army secretly entered the kingdom, slipping past the defense lines and eliminating many patrol soldiers without leaving a trace. When they reached Yoko's house, Gara immediately approached her with the intention of kidnapping, but Yoko resisted in time, attacking his weak point, causing the enemy to retreat. However, Yoko's counterattacks were not enough to stop Gara, who was too skilled in ninja techniques. Gara quickly overwhelmed Yoko and used his sophisticated techniques to force her to reveal Dark Schneider's location. Although Gara had tried to threaten and interrogate Yoko, she remained determined to keep silent, refusing to reveal any information about Dark Schneider. Faced with her stubbornness, Gara decided to use contemptible actions, deliberately attacking her with despicable tricks. In that moment, Dark Schneider's personality in Lucian's body awakened, shouting angrily, causing the guards and officials in the court to immediately pay attention to the situation. Although Lucian could not yet fully control Dark Schneider's power, clear signs of his resurrection were becoming increasingly stronger. Not wanting to directly confront Dark Schneider when not ready, Gara quickly kidnapped Yoko and fled on the back of a giant dragon, leaving dark traces in the cloud-filled sky. The pursuing army could not match his astonishing speed, and Yoko fell into a dangerous situation. While the entire kingdom was in chaos, Gara presented a challenging condition to the High Priest. There was only one way to save Yoko's life: surrender Dark Schneider to him. This was a difficult decision because Dark Schneider, despite his great power, was also a potential threat. Meanwhile, Schneider was the only one who could confront Gara and save Yoko. But currently, he was still sealed in Lucian's body, waiting for someone to release his power. Faced with a situation with little time left, Princess Sheila, the king's daughter, decided to step up and take on this responsibility. No one else possessed the noble virtue needed to perform the release ritual with a virgin's kiss accompanied by a prayer in the name of the goddess of beauty. Princess Sheila, with determination and sacrifice, conducted the ritual seriously. She came to meet and bring Dark Schneider back to reality. His magical power immediately erupted powerfully, marking the majestic return of one of the most fearsome wizards to ever exist. However, not unexpectedly, as soon as he regained his freedom, Dark Schneider immediately displayed his cold and arrogant nature. With a challenging voice, he declared that saving Yoko was completely not among his concerns, surprising everyone present. Schneider's action was like throwing cold water on the kingdom's fragile hope. Princess Zayla, who had just gone through so much difficulty to resurrect him, could not accept such selfishness. In uncontrollable anger, Sheila decided to teach Dark Schneider a lesson. Without a word, the princess rushed forward and slapped the dark wizard hard in the face. The resounding slap represented the fury of a woman who could no longer endure his arrogant nature. After receiving a powerful slap from Princess Sheila, Dark Schneider reluctantly agreed to participate in the mission to rescue Yoko. Instead of keeping herself safe behind others, Sheila decided to participate directly in the battle. Not afraid to venture into enemy territory, she knew that only by facing danger could she help Dark Schneider in the confrontation with Gara in the Valley of the Dead, where danger always lurked. The journey to the valley did not go smoothly. As soon as they set foot in enemy territory, their group immediately fell into an ambush. An elite ninja team, wielding sharp weapons, appeared from all sides, attacking with frightening speed and precision. Princess Sheila, without hesitation, quickly drew the sword at her side and plunged into battle with a courageous spirit. Each sword stroke demonstrated her determination and combat skills. But in the chaos, a moment of distraction caused Sheila's blade to go astray, accidentally cutting one of her teammates. This incident caused their team to fall into a state of confusion and disorientation for a moment. Dark Schneider, with a cold gaze, assessed the situation and needed only a few seconds to act. With a quick incantation, he activated magic missiles, launching a series of blazing fires that eliminated all the ninjas in an instant. When the battle ended, he turned to Sheila, his lips curling into a contemptuous smile. In the dark wizard's gaze appeared mockery, accompanied by taunts that the princess should leave behind her sword and heavy armor, because with her fighting ability, continuing to participate would only burden the group in this dangerous journey. Sheila was insulted, but could only grit her teeth and endure. Her dignity was deeply wounded, but she remained determined not to give up. Meanwhile, in the Valley of the Dead, Gara, with a malicious tone, continuously provoked Yoko. He not only physically imprisoned her, but also tried to destroy her spirit by exposing dark secrets about Dark Schneider. With an evil smile, Gara told about the Dark Wizard's promiscuous past, someone whom Yoko had once admired. Dark Schneider was not just a powerful wizard, but was also famous for over 400 years of existence with hundreds of fleeting relationships. The number of women who had passed through Dark Schneider's life had exceeded 300, which made Yoko feel dizzy. The image of a valiant hero in her mind was now gradually fading, replaced by doubt and unending confusion. Each of Gara's words was like a sharp blade cutting into Yoko's dignity. She had once believed in Dark Schneider, had thought he was a different person, strong, free, and captivating, but not a betrayer of emotions. Gara's revelation threw her into a mix of chaotic emotions, not knowing if she should continue to believe in the man she had once considered an important part of her life. Not long after the attack began, rescue forces from the kingdom broke through the large gate of Gara's base, rushing inside. The situation became increasingly serious. Facing pressure from the royal army, Gara did not hesitate to summon a giant bull-headed demon. The monster, with its rippling muscles and fiery red eyes, clearly demonstrated superior strength, a formidable weapon to destroy the rescue troops. Meanwhile, Dark Schneider, with his inherent confidence, showed no concern. He quickly ordered the escort soldiers to stay behind to protect Princess Sheila, while he and the princess would continue to advance deeper into the enemy's lair. Although many warriors showed concern and opposed this dangerous plan, Schneider needed only a few words to persuade them. With sharp speaking skills, he made them believe that the mission to protect the princess was not only a responsibility but also a great honor. Dark Schneider's words sank deep into the warriors' minds, making them agree to stay without the slightest suspicion that they had been skillfully deceived. After successfully persuading them, Schneider and Sheila quickly separated from the army and continued their journey deep inside Gara's base. Continuing on the path leading to Gara's hideout, Dark Schneider and the princess unexpectedly encountered a strange creature with the ability to create a terrible corrosive phenomenon. The monster, with its bizarre body surrounded by a powerful protective barrier, not only blocked all attacks but also reversed the magical power of its opponents. The explosive magic from Dark Schneider seemed unable to weaken the creature's solid defense. In this difficult moment, the Dark Wizard realized that his normal power was not enough to break through this solid protective layer. Amid the impasse, Sheila did not sit idle. She quickly provided intelligent guidance and utilized her analytical abilities. Thanks to Sheila's support, the monster's barrier began to show weaknesses. Seeing the opportunity, Dark Schneider silently prepared his final attack. With a quick incantation, he launched powerful magic that broke through the monster's defense and completely destroyed it. With victory in hand, both continued deeper into the castle, which concealed countless unforeseen dangers. After eliminating the bizarre creature, the path ahead seemed to have become easier, but disasters still lurked in every corner. While advancing into the dark corridor of the castle, Sheila was suddenly attracted to an ancient sword lying abandoned by the path. The light reflecting from the blade made her unable to resist her curiosity. She inadvertently touched the sword without knowing it was a cursed weapon, extremely dangerously poisoned. This carelessness immediately led to serious consequences. While not paying attention, the sharp blade slightly grazed Dark Schneider, transmitting deadly poison into his body. Immediately, the Dark Wizard's power began to visibly weaken. The poison quickly spread throughout his body, reducing his ability to use magic. With no other choice, Dark Schneider had to use a special ability to extract all the poison from his body, to restore his power and continue the battle. But the problem did not stop there. When the cursed sword was inadvertently touched by Sheila, an evil force was awakened. The fire demon Ifrit, a powerful creature once sealed in the ancient sword, now rose from its 1,000-year sleep. The surrounding atmosphere quickly heated up as Hellfire began to blaze. Sheila's carelessness had led to the summoning of this terrible creature. Now both she and Dark Schneider had to face a new enemy, more powerful than anything they had ever confronted. Gara, the renowned swordsman and Dark Schneider's right-hand man, revealed the classification of magic systems in the world they lived in. Wizards, priests, and other magic users typically relied on 4 main types of magic to increase their power. First, ordinary magic was applied through the use of simple characters and incantations. Second, spirit magic, a more advanced form, focused on the power of the mind and spirit, allowing users to control both the thoughts and emotions of others. Third, white magic, used by priests and followers of ancient gods, was guided by deep faith in divine forces. Finally, dark magic, the darkest form of magic, relied on dangerous pacts with evil forces from other dimensions. Besides these main types of magic, there was another form, less commonly used but extremely powerful: elemental magic. This magic was based on pacts with natural entities dwelling in the 4 basic elements of the world: earth, water, fire, and air. These entities not only had great power, but were also the source of natural strength, existing since the beginning of the universe. Dark Schneider, as one of the most powerful dark wizards to ever exist, was famous for his ability to control fire and lightning, 2 key elements from the air and fire realms. Whenever he unleashed attack magic, blazing fire and fierce lightning appeared, turning all surrounding enemies into ashes. This power made everyone who confronted Dark Schneider terrified. However, a strange paradox occurred when Schneider faced the fire demon Ifrit, a powerful creature governing fire in the fire realm. Although Schneider was a master of controlling fire, in the battle with Ifrit, all his fire-related magic became completely useless. Ifrit was not just an entity capable of controlling ordinary fire. It was the embodiment of pure fire, a primitive form of fire with superior power. Any attack that Dark Schneider used, no matter how powerful, could not harm this giant creature. All fire attacks were either absorbed by Ifrit's flames or dissipated as soon as they approached. In this life-or-death battle, Dark Schneider clearly understood that he could not win by using his normal power. Under the fire demon's fury, the entire surrounding space was distorted by temperatures reaching thousands of degrees. The air shook, and space seemed to shatter under the terrible heat. To protect himself and Princess Sheila, Dark Schneider quickly created a defensive barrier with magic, hoping that this shield could somewhat block the terrifying heat from Ifrit's blazing fire. However, the demon's flames were too powerful, and the barrier could only withstand for a short time. The barrier began to gradually disintegrate, the power of the flames threatening to destroy both of them. Dark Schneider was acutely aware of the dangerous situation, knowing that this barrier could not protect both him and the princess at the same time. Faced with a difficult choice, Dark Schneider decided to sacrifice himself, throwing himself into the fierce flames to leave the safe position for Princess Sheila. The flames burned his body. His skin was scorched under the terrible heat, but Dark Schneider's eyes showed no fear or regret. Instead of being consumed by Ifrit's flames, Dark Schneider chose to confront it directly. He used the enormous heat from the fire demon to activate a supreme magic, Exodus. This was Schneider's secret technique, an attack with power 10 times greater than the flames that Ifrit possessed. The fire from the Exodus magic erupted powerfully like a firestorm, sweeping away everything in its path. This power not only weakened Ifrit but completely crushed that demonic entity. Finally, before Dark Schneider's superior power, the fire demon was forced to bow in defeat. Its giant form gradually disintegrated, the fire slowly extinguished, and Ifrit returned to its original form, a magic sword. The sword was no longer a threat, having lost its previous fearsome form. Overcoming all obstacles and challenges throughout the journey, Dark Schneider and Princess Sheila finally reached Gara's main base. However, the Dark Wizard, no matter how powerful, had consumed a large amount of energy in the battle with Ifrit and many other spells throughout the journey. Before the presence of Gara, a cunning and strategic ninja master, Dark Schneider realized that this confrontation would not be easy. His depleted energy source put him at a significant disadvantage against his opponent. The confrontation between magic and swordsmanship in the fierce battle between Dark Schneider and Gara did not last long. The outcome of the duel depended on whether the wizard could complete the incantation before the swordsman could approach and deliver a fatal blow. Gara, a renowned swordsman with superior talent, demonstrated a series of sword techniques filled with killing intent. Each sword stroke he unleashed carried an extremely powerful sword energy, attacking the opponent directly with formidable force. Although Dark Schneider timely created a magic shield to block the attack, the terrifying power from Gara's technique was still strong enough to throw him dozens of meters away. Dark Schneider's body was pushed back, clearly feeling the opponent's great power. Realizing that this physical confrontation was not in his favor, Dark Schneider immediately decided to change tactic. He resolutely chose a risky option, standing still and focusing all his mental energy to recite a destructive spell with great devastating power. This magic, if completed, would cause unimaginable chaos, destroying everything in sight. However, before the spell could be fully activated, Gara quickly exploited the opening and approached Dark Schneider. The cold swordsman swung his sword, cutting off his opponent's arm, causing blood to spatter. Despite losing a part of his body, Dark Schneider remained calm, and with extraordinary willpower, the final spell was activated. Gara immediately suffered a counterattack, losing an arm similar to his opponent. Both were seriously injured, each paying a heavy price with a part of their body in this fierce confrontation. When both were exhausted and driven to the edge, Gara suddenly changed the direction of the battle, taking advantage of the precious time to provoke Dark Schneider. He began to talk about the sick thoughts he had conceived relating to Yoko, the important girl in Dark Schneider's life. Expecting that his words would anger Dark Schneider, Gara hoped to make his opponent lose control. However, contrary to the swordsman's expectations, Dark Schneider not only did not get angry but responded with a strangely calm and relaxed attitude. The Dark Wizard even enthusiastically joined in Gara's story, turning the tense atmosphere between the two enemies into something light and somewhat strange. After this unexpected conversation, both decided to put an end to the duel. They agreed to finish each other with a final move, without hesitation before any risks that might occur. Gara concentrated all his power into his ultimate technique, the true demon god sword, releasing a sword energy with terrible destructive power, hoping to completely eliminate Dark Schneider. Although he had only one arm left, Dark Schneider did not flinch before this deadly attack. With his unparalleled power, he easily stopped the technique that Gara unleashed. In response, the Dark Wizard began to recite the legendary spell named Exodus, magic with power far beyond all limits. When the final incantation was uttered, the entire castle, where the battle took place, vanished in a terrible explosion created by the power of Exodus. Finally, when the fury subsided, the winner was none other than Dark Schneider. But instead of finishing off Gara as he had done in the past, Dark Schneider surprisingly made a different decision. He chose to spare his opponent's life and persuaded Gara to join his ranks, to fight together for a greater goal. Gara, despite suffering a heavy defeat, still held deep respect for Dark Schneider's power and spirit. This respect made him agree to return and stand by Dark Schneider on the difficult path ahead. Not only Gara but also the giant dragon that Gara had once ridden decided to join this alliance, creating a team more powerful than ever before. Upon receiving the shocking news of the unexpected betrayal, Kasu, one of the top leaders of the Dark Rebellion army, became furiously angry. The rage burning like fire in his heart made Kasu unable to maintain his composure. He immediately ordered the summoning of Arshes, the strongest swordsman among the 4 heavenly kings. Arshes, an outstanding female warrior with unparalleled sword skills, was assigned the critically important mission of tracking down and eliminating Dark Schneider, their mortal enemy. Meanwhile, Arshes had led the Third Army, silently approaching the border of Metallicana, waiting for the right moment to launch an attack on the fortress. She was famous not only for her extraordinary fighting skills, but also for the dark elf blood flowing in her veins, creating a strangely seductive beauty and unparalleled authority. However, behind that majestic appearance was a terrible secret, a complicated and complex relationship between her and Dark Schneider himself. When she was young, Arshes had been raised and cared for by Dark Schneider as his closest person. To her, he was not just a mentor guiding her on the path of learning magic and swordsmanship, but also like the image of a powerful father, even a figure in the shadows. The complex feelings between them lasted for hundreds of years, since they had fought side by side in devastating battles. But time had completely changed everything. Arshes now carried deep resentment in her heart. The betrayal she felt from Dark Schneider when he established his own harem was like a knife stabbing into her heart. Jealousy and anger increasingly exploded as she witnessed Dark Schneider betraying her trust. After many decades, the flame of hatred had burned in her heart, ready to turn into deadly fury. Being busy preparing for the attack on Metallicana, Arshes decided to entrust the task of hunting Dark Schneider to Schneider, a loyal subordinate in the Orbital 3 team. Shin was someone she trusted would complete this mission with outstanding excellence. Meanwhile, Dark Schneider, after the bloody battle with Gara and the giant dragon, continued his wandering journey across distant lands. During his undetermined adventure, they accidentally discovered a young girl running away from the pursuit of a giant spider. With his incorrigible flirtatious nature, Dark Schneider could not control himself at the sight. Ignoring the warnings of the dragon, he immediately intervened, attacking the spider with a few simple techniques that clearly demonstrated his invincible power. Dark Schneider quickly eliminated the monster in an instant, and of course, he did not forget to take advantage of this opportunity to show his charm to the rescued girl. Kongo, although unable to prevent Dark Schneider's impulsive action, always maintained a cautious attitude. The feeling that something was wrong lurking behind this incident made him frown. From a distance, Kongo warned Dark Schneider that he needed to pay more attention to everything around him. However, instead of listening, Dark Schneider just laughed mockingly at Kongo's advice. His arrogance and excessive confidence made him not bother to care. Not only that, Dark Schneider threw a punch so strong that Kongo flew far away, all warnings becoming meaningless before his unruly nature. When night fell, after dining with Dark Schneider, the girl suddenly took the initiative to approach his private room. With light but calculating steps, she intended to use her beauty to win the Dark Wizard's trust, then find a way to neutralize his power. Her goal was not simply to seduce, but also to find an opportunity to place a charm on Schneider, something that could make him lose all ability to resist. However, Dark Schneider was not one to be easily deceived. In a quick moment, he discovered traces of the armor that the girl had worn earlier. It was a sign that she was not a harmless maiden, but Schneider, one of the Orbital 3, a formidable agent of Arshes. Thanks to noticing this small detail, Schneider responded in time, casting a sophisticated illusion spell before Schneider could place the charm on him. The spell made her believe that her plan had succeeded while in reality, he was still completely alert and monitoring her every move. Although Schneider could not defeat Dark Schneider with her power, the Dark Wizard was not in a hurry to end this interesting game. Throughout the long night, he patiently enticed her with sweet words like pouring honey into her ears, gradually causing the cold-hearted female assassin's heart to begin to waver. Hidden behind Schneider's strong and cold exterior was a vulnerable heart, something that Dark Schneider skillfully touched with his irresistible, mesmerizing charm. Shin could not prevent herself from falling into the emotional trap that Schneider had skillfully set, and by the time she realized it, it was too late. Before Dark Schneider left her base, Schneider still retained a bit of reason. Despite her confused heart, she tried to warn the Dark Wizard about the dangers lying ahead. With a worried voice, she revealed that in the Orbital 3 team, there was another assassin much stronger than her, who had been sent to block his progress. Although Schneider had once believed that no one could subdue her, now she understood better than anyone that Dark Schneider's attraction and irresistible magic could defeat anyone, including herself. Like Gara before, those who confronted Dark Schneider often could not avoid being drawn into the emotional vortex he created. Despite receiving the sincere warning from Schneider, Dark Schneider showed no concern at all. On the contrary, he walked away with unwavering confidence, as if all challenges ahead were predetermined to be just a joke. His mindset was full of arrogance and pride, not at all affected by any warnings, no matter how dangerous the enemy might be. That self-satisfaction and feeling of invincibility had always been the characteristic of Dark Schneider, making him different from other wizards. On the way to the lair of the Dark Rebellion army, Dark Schneider had no idea that he had fallen into a pre-prepared ambush. When the attack began, the Dark Wizard was momentarily surprised but did not lose his confident demeanor. The person standing before him was none other than the assassin from the Orbital 3, the one Schneider had warned about. This assassin appeared with an overwhelming presence, emanating a power and brutality far exceeding any opponent Dark Schneider had ever faced. Schneider's words now became clearer than ever. This person was truly a fearsome danger. However, instead of fear or apprehension, Dark Schneider only smiled challengingly. In his mind, each battle was just another opportunity to demonstrate his superior power and deadly charm. Even before such a powerful enemy, Dark Schneider still believed that victory, as always, was within his grasp. Seeing the enemy's large army before them, Kongu quickly issued a warning. He advised Dark Schneider to think carefully before entering the battle, as the number of enemies seemed overwhelming. However, the Dark Wizard paid no attention to this advice. In his mind, the biggest concern was a most peculiar comparison whether he or Kaihan was more handsome. Ignoring all cautious calculations, Dark Schneider immediately activated a wide-area flame magic. In an instant, the terrible fire engulfed the battlefield, burning all of Kaihan's soldiers with not a single survivor. The scorching fire wiped out the minions as if they had never existed. Kaihan, unwilling to be outdone, counterattacked immediately, rushing forward with terrifying speed, swinging her sword to cut Dark Schneider into hundreds of pieces. However, that moment of triumph quickly faded when Kaihan realized it was just an illusion created by Dark Schneider to deceive her. The Dark Wizard then launched an explosive technique, making everything around explode. With a mad laugh echoing, he believed the battle was about to end. But Dark Schneider did not expect that Kaihan was also a master of using illusion magic. The tricks he had once prided himself on were now skillfully countered by his opponent. Kaihan was not only a powerful swordsman but also proficient in ancient magic, something few could easily deal with. Dark Schneider, having recently acquired the Flame God Sword, saw this as a perfect opportunity to test the true power of this dark blade. Raising the weapon high, he charged at his opponent with a powerful attack. The blade not only shattered Kaihan's weapon, but also crushed the solid armor she wore. However, when the armor broke apart, Dark Schneider was astonished to discover that the person facing him was not a male warrior, but a woman. Dark Schneider's attitude immediately changed when he discovered his opponent was a woman. Famous for his flirtatious character, he suddenly became gentle and behaved more softly, constantly flashing a seductive smile. But Kaihan was not fooled by this change. Clearly aware of Dark Schneider's weakness, she did not hesitate to use the ancient language magic that Arshes had taught her. She began to chant, and immediately Dark Schneider's body began to turn to stone. Kaihan's power was not something Dark Schneider could easily resist, as ancient language magic had deep origins and could not be broken by ordinary techniques. To neutralize ancient language magic, one needed to determine which ancient deity had created the spell. Even without a pact with them, a powerful wizard could still negotiate with the intermediate gods to ask them to break the spell. Dark Schneider, although being turned to stone, still kept a bit of hope that he would find a way to deal with it. As Kaihan prepared to end the duel with a fatal blow, she threw an extremely powerful energy ball toward Dark Schneider. However, at that moment, a giant spider carrying charms suddenly appeared between the two. The spider was the product of Schneider, who had been secretly following the battle and could not let Dark Schneider fail. Thanks to the spider's protection, Dark Schneider escaped death by a hair's breadth, continuing this life-or-death battle. After the tense confrontation, Schneider did not hesitate to frankly admit that she was ready to follow Dark Schneider for life, even if it meant betraying Arshes, who had once been her master and benefactor. This unexpected declaration added fuel to the fire, making Kaihan extremely angry. In her rage, Kaihan inadvertently revealed the name of her patron deity, a subordinate god of the deities with whom Dark Schneider had made pacts. Realizing this, Dark Schneider flashed a triumphant smile, knowing that Kaihan's petrification magic was now completely useless. For him, everything became clear, with a spell originating from a deity inferior to the gods he had made pacts with. Breaking it was just a small matter. Without wasting time, Dark Schneider immediately responded with a brutal technique. The technique he had proudly called Rambo, a powerful long-range attack, was enough to temporarily overwhelm Kaihan. Sitting in the chair was Gun Ford, a middle-aged man with graying hair and sharp eyes. She had no intention of giving up. On the contrary, she was more determined than ever. In that tense moment, Kaihan chose to use the ultimate measure, summoning a giant monster called Venom Hydra. With a quick motion, she took out a mysterious vial from her robe, opened the lid, and chanted to call the monster. Venom Hydra, a giant snake with the ability to spew petrifying poison, quickly appeared, ready to crush any enemy in its way. The terrible power of Venom Hydra did not come from the ancient gods. This made Dark Schneider realize that using ordinary magic to deal with it would yield no results. Recognizing that the situation was becoming increasingly dangerous, he quickly sought a safe position, where the wind blowing back would help block the poisonous vapor from the snake monster. While moving, Dark Schneider carefully observed and realized that the real weakness of the monster was not in itself, but in the control crystal that Kaihan was holding in her hand. Using his intelligence and quick wit, Dark Schneider launched a precise magical strike aimed directly at the crystal. When the crystal shattered right in front of Kaihan, Venom Hydra immediately lost control. No longer bound, the snake monster turned back to attack its own master. Dark Schneider did not miss the opportunity, quickly reciting a destructive spell to eliminate the monster, ending its fearsome presence on the battlefield. The most surprising thing was that instead of letting Kaihan suffer the pain of defeat, Dark Schneider decided to use magic to heal her. This action astonished Kaihan, leaving her in shock. The emotions inside her became as chaotic as what her sister Shin Eri had felt before. The arrogance and hatred in Kaihan's heart gradually dissolved, giving way to complex and incomprehensible feelings about the dark wizard standing before her. Everything seemed to have ended, but fate had unexpected turns. On the way to the confrontation with the final enemy in the Demon Orbit 3 group, an unexpected event occurred. Dark Schneider, after continuously depleting too much magical energy in the previous battle, suddenly returned to his true form, the boy Lucian. Exhaustion had drained Dark Schneider's power, making him unable to maintain his powerful form any longer. By chance, while Lucian was wandering through enemy territory, he unexpectedly encountered Yoko, who was also anxiously searching for him. As soon as they met, the conversation between them quickly became tense when Yoko recognized a familiar name. Kongu, the dragon accompanying Lucian, and the soldiers escorting Yoko suddenly seemed to recall a mysterious story that had been forgotten for 15 years. They discussed how Kongu was not merely a powerful dragon, but likely Prince Kongu himself, Princess Sheila's brother. He was the one who had transformed into the legendary Dragon Knight to protect Metallicana in the Great War against Dark Schneider. The battle had left countless unanswered questions, and Kongu's life or death since then remained an enigma. The story gradually revealed suspicions that the current Kongu might be a prince who had been reborn as a dragon. Meanwhile, at the fortress of Count Jamon, the last member of the Demon Orbit 3, darkness was enveloping everything. Count Jamon was performing evil rituals to enhance his power by drinking the blood of virgins. He not only ordered his subordinates to transform into werewolves, but also sent them to hunt young girls to perform this dark ritual. By using the keen sense of smell of the werewolves, they detected Yoko within their scenting range and quickly chose her as their target. The situation quickly became dangerous with the threat from the werewolves. Dark Schneider, in Lucian's form, could not keep calm. In his heart, Yoko was not just a childhood friend, but also someone with an extremely important role. For anyone who dared to have intentions of harming Yoko, Dark Schneider's fury was inevitable. Although his current body was weak and small like a boy, the will and power inside was still that of the undefeated Dark Wizard. The werewolves' arrogance made them look down on Lucian, and they quickly attacked him without hesitation. A fierce battle broke out. In the moment when it seemed Lucian would have to suffer defeat as the opponent delivered a fatal blow, a miracle occurred. Dark Schneider's powerful survival instinct arose, and he suddenly turned the tables by casting an incomplete version of the venom spell. Although his current power could not compare to when he was in his true form, it was still enough to terrify the werewolf, making him tremble before the power that Lucian had just displayed. Without hesitation, Dark Schneider pressured the werewolf, forcing him to reveal all information about Count Jamon, the one behind the dark plots enveloping this territory. After extracting all necessary secrets, Lucian finished off the enemy, decisively and coldly. None of Lucian's actions could escape the close surveillance of Jamon, who was always watching from afar with a poisonous gaze. Count Jamon, who had been silently observing, clearly understood Lucian's weakness and knew that if he could reveal the secret about Dark Schneider being sealed within a boy's body, it would be the perfect opportunity for him to gain an advantage. In his dark mind, Jamon immediately devised a cruel plan, not only aimed at defeating Lucian but also capturing Yoko and subjugating the traitors in the ranks of the Demon Orbit 3, specifically Schneider and Kaihan, two warriors secretly following Schneider. In reality, contrary to Jamon's thinking, Schneider and Kaihan were not easily subdued. Both had planned to pretend to be captured so they could act when the opportunity ripened. Their real goal was not loyalty to anyone in the Demon Orbit 3, but to prevent a larger conspiracy. Jamon was secretly plotting to overthrow the 4 heavenly kings, aiming to usurp ultimate power for himself. Just as Jamon was about to act, Schneider and Kaihan did not give him time to execute his plan. Both coordinated, combining Schneider's exquisite charm magic with Kaihan's Dragon Lance Death Slash. The fatal attack was concentrated on the single target of eliminating Jamon at that moment. However, the real nightmare began when they realized that Jamon was not an easy opponent. His body had undergone centuries of dark magic cultivation. Since becoming a vampire, he had become nearly indestructible. The powerful attacks that Schneider and Kaihan launched could not penetrate the dark armor surrounding him. Jamon just stood there with a diabolical smile and challenge, seeing all the enemy's efforts become useless. Confused by the invincibility of the Count, Kaihan and Schneider were forced to quickly retreat, seeking another attack option. They scanned the surroundings, hoping to find some weakness in this dark room. In desperation, Kaihan thought of fairy tales about how to defeat vampires. These legends often mentioned classic items like garlic and crucifixes. With a thin ray of hope, she quickly took out a pinch of dried garlic and a crucifix, then boldly waved them in front of Jamon. However, these traditional items had no effect. Jamon was not at all confused. On the contrary, he burst into loud, arrogant laughter. His bloodshot eyes glowed in the darkness, reflecting contempt for Kaihan's efforts. For Jamon, these items were just child's play. His body had transcended ordinary threats, as it was protected by layers upon layers of evil magic from centuries ago. Although Kaihan knew this, she did not stop fighting. Her unwavering belief that Dark Schneider, whom she respected and even loved, would soon arrive and destroy the enemy, added spiritual strength to her in the moment of confronting danger. Schneider, standing close to Kaihan, also kept her eyes fixed on Lucian, full of hope that Schneider would appear and unleash his terrible power to destroy Jamon. But neither of them knew that Schneider, currently in Lucian's form, had completely lost the supernatural power they had once witnessed. Instead of being a great wizard with the ability to cast destructive spells, Schneider was now almost a normal human, sealed and unable to use the magic he had once mastered. Kaihan and Schneider's hope was placed on a weak form, which they were not aware of, while Jamon remained self-satisfied, standing at the pinnacle of power, certain that no one could threaten him. Schneider's situation became increasingly tense. Lucian, with Dark Schneider's soul sealed inside, felt his own weakness and the desperation of those around him. Although he very much wanted to release destructive power, he was constrained by the powerful sealing spell that had imprisoned him for so long. Would a miracle happen to liberate Schneider from this situation, or would the entire team fall into Jamon's hands? He was waiting to carry out his dark domination plan. Jamon stood proudly, his eyes gleaming with self-satisfaction as he trampled his enemies underfoot. He believed that before long, his supreme power would spread throughout the world. Caught in delusions of global domination, Jamon did not realize another danger was quietly rising. Schneider, in Lucian's form, was gradually weakening as he witnessed the women he loved most, Schneider and Kaihan, being captured, beaten, and oppressed. The seal on Lucian's body was gradually breaking the will, causing Schneider's supernatural power to be bound inside. Normally, Lucian had to be completely unconscious, falling into a deep sleep, for Schneider to break the seal and awaken. However, a strange thing happened. Both entities of Lucian and Schneider seemed to be alert at the same time. The boy Lucian still retained control of the body, which prevented Schneider, with all the power of a dark wizard, from escaping. The boy's strong will and the seal combined to prevent Schneider from fully awakening. Meanwhile, Jamon silently continued his dark plan. He reached out toward Schneider, preparing to drain all life force from her to double his power. At that moment, Yoko, unable to bear seeing her friend tortured, rushed forward and kicked Jamon directly in the face. Caught by the sudden blow to his face, Jamon went mad with anger, counterattacking powerfully with a cruel kick, sending her flying with a scream of pain echoing throughout the room. Seeing the girl he loved most being abused, Schneider deep within the seal began to struggle wildly. His fierce will reached its peak, breaking all the bonds that the sealing spell had placed on the body. In a moment of liberation, Schneider fully awakened. Lucian's spirit temporarily withdrew, giving way to the unparalleled power of the dark wizard returning to the world. Without hesitation, Schneider cast an advanced form of magic, a type of seductive spell capable of weakening the opponent's spirit. Mystical light from the magic spread throughout the space, striking directly at the spirits of Jamon and all his subordinates. At first glance, that power seemed insufficient to harm Jamon's immortal body. His body remained intact without any mark after the attack. However, the more frightening effect was on his spirit, which was what Schneider had aimed for. With his usual arrogance, Schneider stood before Jamon with a confident demeanor, not at all afraid of the opponent's indestructible diamond-like body. The battle now was not just about power, but a confrontation between will and pride. Who was truly the strongest in this world? Schneider mocked Jamon, making the Count even more furious. Unable to bear the ridicule, Jamon waved his hand, casting a destructive technique aimed at draining Schneider's life force. The laser beam from Jamon's eyes shot toward Schneider, causing him to explode, making his subordinates cheer, thinking their master had achieved absolute victory. But in that moment of joy, the laughter emanating from amidst the dust was not Jamon's, but Schneider's. He was still alive, completely unharmed. Jamon was shocked to realize that what he had just hit was not Schneider, but one of his unfortunate subordinates. It turned out that the magic Schneider had used had significantly weakened Jamon's accuracy. His skill in casting destructive spells was no longer as sharp as before, due to his spirit being seriously affected by Schneider's seductive spell. Driven to madness by Schneider's taunting, Jamon began firing spells wildly everywhere. Dark beams like night flew rapidly toward Schneider and the girls. But Schneider, with superior calmness, showed no sign of flinching. He grabbed one of those deadly magic attacks with his bare hands, making the seemingly irresistible power stream useless. Instead of countering immediately, Schneider skillfully converted the power from the attack into his own energy. That power was not simply a counterattack, but was refined into a powerful lightning technique. When the lightning stream was fired, it did not aim directly at Jamon as everyone expected, but hit the wall behind him. A loud explosion sounded. The wall collapsed, revealing the dawn light from outside pouring into the dark room. Light, the natural enemy of all creatures of darkness, immediately affected Jamon. His body was burned by the light beam. His skin began to melt and turn to dust in an instant. In desperation, Jamon tried to transform into a bat to escape, but Schneider did not give him the opportunity. He quickly stopped Jamon's plan by seizing his blackened wings. Instead of letting Jamon escape, Schneider used those wings as a catalyst to deploy a new type of magic. Jamon, now completely under Schneider's control, had no choice but to bow in submission. To ensure Jamon's absolute loyalty, Schneider recited an ancient curse. He would be transformed into a useless, brain-dead toad immediately if he dared to betray or had intentions of overthrowing his new master. With this forced submission, Jamon, from a mortal enemy, became a puppet in Schneider's hands. It seemed the collapse of the Demon Orbit 3 had come to an end. This was a clear sign that Schneider's next battle would be the inevitable confrontation with Arshes. She was not just one of the 4 heavenly kings, but also someone whom Schneider had once regarded as an adopted daughter, even a close lover from the ancient past. This encounter would not merely be a power struggle, but also an emotional confrontation. At the same time, at the base of the Dark Rebellion army, Abigail, one of the cruel and scheming leaders, was talking with Arshes, fearing that she would follow the path of betrayal like her previous subordinates, Schneider and Kaihan. Abigail proposed that Arshes perform the accused ritual. This was a ritual of great controlling nature over soul and body, ensuring that the person performing the ritual could never betray. This meant that if Arshes performed the accused, She would be eternally bound and serve the rebellion army with no way back. As Arshes stood before this difficult choice, her heart was filled with conflict. Part of her did not want to betray her comrades, those who had fought alongside her for years. But on the other hand, the deep feelings she had for Schneider, who had once been her foster father and secret lover, had never faded. This internal conflict pushed her into a whirlwind of chaos, not knowing whether she could continue fighting for the rebellion army or would be drawn by her heart. Upon completing the accused ritual, Abigail coldly assigned Arshes the mission of leading the attack on Metallicana, without hesitation giving the directive to kill Dark Schneider decisively. Abigail understood clearly that eliminating the strongest one like Schneider would be an important step to accelerate the resurrection process of Anslac, the legendary evil god they were conspiring to restore. At the same time, Kasu and Abigail decided to coordinate in commanding the first and second armies of the rebellion forces, aiming to destroy the evil god seals held by two other royal families. With the second highest power in the Dark Rebellion army, Abigail proved extremely dangerous. He used every means to force Arshes to complete the mission. Abigail did not stop at instigating war, but also directly threatened Arshes' life with the accused spell. His words put Arshes in a dangerous situation. The only way for her to remove this spell was to tear Dark Schneider's heart out of his body. Moreover, if she dared to betray, the spell would take her life immediately. She believed that Bloom was the one blocking her way to her brother. This situation created an inevitable confrontation between the two. A battle where certainly either Schneider or Arshes, or perhaps both, would have to sacrifice on the battlefield. In that context, Schneider and Yoko had to part ways with Schneider and Kaihan to return to Metallicana to rescue the kingdom in distress. Meanwhile, Schneider temporarily entrusted the responsibility of protecting Metallicana to Gara, his trusted friend. Gara would lead his elite army to protect this land, maintaining the battle formation until Schneider could return. With unwavering determination, Gara rode on the dragon's back, plunging into the battlefield ready to face any enemy. On the other side of the battle line, Arshes was equally powerful. She entered the battle riding on the back of the bird master, with a cold gaze and determination to destroy. The encounter between the two enemies was inevitable. Immediately, Gara confronted Arshes. The Thunder Emperor, Arshes' nickname, with the Thunder God sword in hand, possessed terrible lightning power, launching attacks with devastating force. Gara was not inferior, firmly holding his Devil King sword, delivering sharp and powerful sword strikes, making the duel more fierce than ever. In a dramatic moment, when two strong winds from the wings of the bird master and the dragon created a powerful vortex, Arshes lost her balance in mid-air. Not missing the opportunity, Gara concentrated all his power into the Devil God sword, without hesitation delivering a fatal strike, cutting Arshes' body in half. However, in a surprising counterattack, the Thunder Emperor quickly used illusion magic to deceive Gara, creating a copy of herself. Taking advantage of this surprise, Arshes suddenly appeared from above, using the Thunder God's sword to strike down hard, cutting off Gara's right arm in a lightning-fast attack. Faced with this tense situation, Gara decided not to hold back any advantage anymore. He used illusion magic once again, but this time not just to deceive the opponent. Gara also demonstrated the skill of creating 7 identical copies of himself. This move put Arshes in an extremely difficult situation when she could not distinguish which was the original and which were just illusions. Gara, feeling his power surging, removed his shining pink armor, a symbol of confidence and the desire for victory. He no longer needed the heavy protection of that armor, deciding to determine victory or defeat with Arshes by a fatal move. All 7 copies, along with the original Gara, simultaneously swung the Devil God sword. The formidable blades in their hands rushed toward Arshes. Each sharp cut was delivered with full power, making it impossible for Arshes to predict from which direction the real attack would come. She tried to focus her entire mind, listening to the slightest movements to find out which was the real Devil God sword among the illusory shadows in front of her. In that brief moment, Arshes finally discovered the position of the real Gara. With her quickness, she swung the Thunder God sword, blocking the opponent's fatal strike. However, the attack from the Devil God sword was so powerful and overwhelming that although Arshes had successfully defended, the Thunder God sword was still broken in half by the pressure from the Devil God sword. The sword she had trusted for so many years was now just a useless piece of iron. In a moment when all hope seemed to have vanished, the battle appeared to have been decided as Gara stood before Arshes with a victorious smile on his lips. However, the situation quickly changed once more. Arshes did not panic but decided to turn the battle around in an unexpected way. She used lightning magic to cast a brilliant bolt of lightning aimed at disorienting Gara, making him blink in a moment of confusion. The moment Gara lost his vigilance, Arshes moved with dizzying speed, jumping into the air and delivering a fatal thunder strike, piercing straight through Gara's body, causing blood to flow from the wound. The secret of the Thunder God sword was finally revealed in that moment. The normal sword that everyone had seen was just a shell, a blindfold, while the real blade of lightning was the electric current emitted from the sword. That was Arshes's real weapon. That lightning stream, sharp and cruel, had pierced through Gara, pushing him to a disastrous defeat. In a dramatic one-on-one duel, Arshes achieved a perfect victory. Her opponent now lay fallen with no ability to resist. Despite the resounding victory, Arshes showed no gloating. Instead, her eyes were determined as she stood before Gara's weakened body, holding the Thunder God's sword firmly in her hand. Victory belonged to her. Now Arshes had full power to decide the enemy's fate. Just as she was about to deliver the final blow to finish Gara once and for all, an unexpected event occurred. Suddenly, from behind, the stone bridge where they were fighting was violently shaken. A fierce attack from afar struck, breaking the bridge's structure, causing large rocks to fall into the river below their feet. Arshes's eyes turned toward the source of the attack, and immediately she recognized who was behind it. Schneider, whom she thought was far from the battlefield, had unexpectedly appeared. The power from the recent attack was unmistakable. It was Dark Schneider's signature. Seeing Schneider appear beside another girl, Arshes's eyes flashed with intense jealousy. Recalling the past when they were still a couple, her heart was filled with chaotic emotions. In that moment, she revealed her distraction, not realizing that Schneider had approached her without her noticing. "Let's start the war conference." Beginning to use intimate gestures, he gently touched her hand, smiled seductively, gradually drawing Arshes back into his orbit. The emotions in her heart surged, making her body almost collapse under his charm. In just a moment, Schneider had almost succeeded in persuading Arshes to return to his side. But right then, Arshes suddenly felt something strange happening. The accused spell that Abigail had placed on her began to take effect, like a cruel reminder of the invisible bond between them. Feeling the risk of being destroyed if she allowed herself to continue falling into Schneider's emotional trap, she immediately retreated. Without a word of farewell, leaving only a promise of a rematch in the future, Arshes disappeared into the night. Not even a few hours later, a heavy rain suddenly poured down across Metallicana. The entire city was immersed in a thick curtain of rain, as if nature was reflecting the gloom of the times. The high priest judged that the Dark Rebellion army would not choose rainy weather to attack, so he ordered the soldiers to take the opportunity to rest and recover their strength after days of intense fighting. Meanwhile, Yoko, with her kindness, rolled up her sleeves to help the wounded soldiers, continually caring for and nurturing them. Her dedication to the soldiers made everyone respect and appreciate her. However, Yoko's attitude toward Schneider was completely different. She deliberately kept her distance, cold and hard to understand. Many believed that this change stemmed from her recent discovery that Arshes, who was fighting against them, had once been Schneider's lover. The relationship between them was becoming complex and full of contradictions. While Metallicana was still immersed in rain, the high priest, along with Princess Sheila, decided to visit the kingdom's most famous prophet. They wished for her to check the status of the sacred seal imprisoning most of Schneider's power. Recent unusual manifestations made them suspect that the seal had been broken without the need for an incantation or a virgin's kiss, the two traditional elements to release the seal. The prophet, with mysterious light from her crystal ball, contemplated deeply. She confirmed that the seal was still intact and in perfect condition, with no sign of it being violated. An evil person could not arbitrarily break this seal, which was blessed by the goddess of love. However, if the sealed person had true love, a feeling acknowledged by the goddess, then self-liberation of the seal could become a reality. Hearing this, the high priest and Princess Sheila began to realize the connection between love and Schneider's power. They understood that Schneider might have begun to develop feelings for someone. This had enabled him to escape the seal 3 consecutive times without the usual conditions. Who that person was, they still didn't know, but perhaps that person had made Schneider different and stronger. The prophet continued to observe the crystal ball. Her eyes suddenly darkened, as if covered by a mysterious shadow. The final images appearing in the ball revealed a scene full of sorrow and tragedy. She saw Schneider's death with his heart torn apart, a a painful and inevitable death. Princess Sheila anxiously relayed every word of the prophet to Schneider, emphasizing that his death had been clearly predicted. However, contrary to everyone's concerns, Schneider just laughed dryly, his confident attitude unwavering. He seemed not to believe in the gloomy predictions, arrogantly asserting that no force, no matter how powerful, could make him fall. For Schneider, everything the prophet said was just a distant vision not worth worrying about. That prediction is for someone else. Schneider laughed. He would never lose under the hand of anyone. Indeed, as if challenging fate, Arshes did not abandon her revenge plan. Not long after Schneider ignored the prophecy, Arshes reappeared, her eyes full of determination and anger. Regardless of the weather, even as thunderstorms poured down across the sky of Metallicana, she did not hesitate to attack. From afar, Arshes fixed her gaze on the solid castle where Schneider was hiding. With a perfect combination of thunder spells and the thunder god's sword, Arshes was determined to tear apart the fortress that Schneider had tried to protect. The storm became more fierce as she summoned powerful magic. Lightning flashed on her sword, cutting through the dark sky like sharp streaks of light. The thunder god's sword, not just an ordinary weapon but a symbol of limitless power, was hardened by the lightning from nature itself. Arshes stood firm amid the storm, creating a vortex of lightning around herself. The ground shook as lightning began to strike down from the high sky, hitting the ground with terrifying power. Light flashed from the blade, followed by an ear-splitting thunder. When the magic she cast struck directly at the solid castle of Metallicana, the thick walls of the fortress, once built to withstand the strongest attacks, began to crumble under Arshes's unimaginable destructive power. Giant stone slabs fell to the ground. Towering watchtowers collapsed in the fierce roar of the storm. Faced with the situation of the Metallicana castle gradually collapsing, Schneider timely cast a solid protective barrier, shielding Princess Sheila and Yoko, the two most important people to him. The corner of his mouth curled into a smile, but his eyes were filled with coldness. Despite the feelings he once had for Arshes, Schneider understood that there was no other way but to confront directly and thoroughly resolve the conflict between them. He turned slightly to Yoko, once again showing his familiar gentleness. He asked to borrow 500 yen from Yoko and promised to return it after resolving everything. Schneider spoke with a slightly humorous tone despite the tense circumstances before them. Yoko narrowed her eyes, unable to believe what she had just heard, but still silently handed over the amount Schneider requested. Receiving the money, he nodded slightly as a promise that he would survive and return. Then, with a powerful jump, Schneider used the sky wall to fly up into the air, preparing to confront the one who was once his lover. However, Arshes was not easily fooled. She had anticipated this move from Schneider and prepared an extremely powerful ancient language spell, a giant ball of thunder and lightning glowing in the sky. With its destructive power, Arshes not only dominated the space, but also completely suppressed any magic that Schneider deployed. Schneider felt the pressure weighing down. His power was drained by the magic ball, preventing him from continuing to fly or using complex magical techniques. In an instant, he was like a prisoner, helpless before the terrible power of the Thunder Emperor. When everything seemed to be turning against Schneider, a powerful presence suddenly appeared. The fire demon, a fighting spirit that had been loyal to him for a long time, decided to intervene. Knowing that his master was in trouble and did not have the right weapon to fight back, the fire demon immediately summoned the flame god sword to place in Schneider's hands. With this sacred weapon, its blade blazing as if burning the very air, he regained the initiative. The image of his sister appeared once more in his mind. The blade of the flame god sword tore through space, striking directly at the bird master, Arshes's giant mount, causing it to be cut in half in an instant and burst into flames in the demon's fire. Smoke and fire rose thickly in the lightning-filled sky. Both opponents now focused only on each other, staring at their adversary, waiting for the perfect moment to attack. Arshes was the one to break the tense atmosphere first. She rushed forward with a technique that had defeated Gara before. The Thunder God sword in Arshes's hand emitted a terrifying power stream. The blade lit up with dazzling lightning bolts, completely overwhelming the Flame God sword. All calculations indicated that the Flame God sword would not be able to withstand this powerful attack. However, the unexpected thing was that the fire demon decided to sacrifice itself to protect its master. With all its remaining power, the fire demon pulled the thunder beast, the animal accompanying Schneider, and absorbed the magic ball that Arshes had created earlier. Thanks to this sacrifice, the forces between the two sides suddenly became balanced. and the attacks from both sides struck each other directly, creating a giant magical explosion that made the space seem to shake. Not stopping there, Arshes remained determined to defeat her opponent. Without backing down, she rushed straight toward Schneider with extreme speed, her powerful hand thrust directly at a vulnerable position on his body, aiming for the brain, where a fatal blow could cause immediate death. In that life or death moment, the protective magic left by the fire demon suddenly disappeared, leaving Schneider in an extremely dangerous state. Just in the moment before Arshes could deliver the fatal blow, Schneider created a final defensive barrier, stopping her deadly hand within inches. Weapons and mounts were not the only decisive factors in the battle between Schneider and Arshes. Although both possessed powerful items, their real battle lay in high-level magic, where each word, each magical symbol flew like destructive winds in the air. Both understood that just a little hesitation or delay was enough for the opponent to take advantage and finish them. With his unmistakable pride, Schneider began to cast a destructive spell, his eyes bright like a never-extinguishing flame. Arshes, facing the one who was once her lover, could not give way. She also plunged into using the same spell as Schneider, as if the two had become so in tune that they understood every move of each other. Magic intertwined, brilliant light flashed in the dark space of the storm. The power of the two was completely equal. Waves of opposing energy continuously repelled each other, causing terrible shockwaves on the battlefield. Neither of them allowed themselves to stop. Schneider continued to use another series of spells. Without hesitation, each of his incantations became stronger and sharper, pushing back all of Arshes' resistance. In response, the Thunder Emperor did not hesitate either, hand raised high, continuing to act exactly the same, neither willing to yield, as if they were rushing into each other with the madness of moths seeking light. Magic exploded, sharp screeching sounds emanated from the powerful blows. In that moment, the image of Arshes in the past appeared in Schneider's mind. The memory of her was not just of a cruel warrior, but also of the girl he once loved. Arshes' gentle gaze when she was still his attendant, the loving smile of the past, seemed to remain intact in his mind. Schneider's mind was filled with emotion when remembering those moments, and it was precisely this distraction that cost him dearly in this fierce battle. Distracted for a moment, Schneider missed the opportunity to defend against a powerful attack from Arshes. A giant lightning bolt from the Thunder God's sword struck him directly, causing his entire body to shake. Silence enveloped the space, as if the battle had come to an end. Everything seemed to pause, as if to honor the moment of Arshes' victory. However, in another corner, Yoko could not believe that Schneider had lost. She did not flinch and even had a strangely firm belief. Schneider still hasn't returned my 500 yen, Yoko thought to herself. No matter how fierce the battle was, in her heart, she firmly believed that he could not lose when he had not yet fulfilled that small promise. Just as Yoko predicted, Schneider was not defeated by Arshes' attack. His body, although hit by extremely powerful lightning bolts from the Thunder God's sword, remained unharmed. On the contrary, his form increased considerably, like a flame that never extinguishes. Although the battle between Schneider and Arshes was extremely intense, their eyes continuously intertwined between hatred and the complex emotions of the past. Schneider still unexpectedly spoke words of love to Arshes, as if those words could stop the impending attack. He spoke with a sincere and emotional voice, trying to evoke the happy memories between them. However, after witnessing many times him being intimate with other girls, Arshes no longer had faith in the sweet words from Schneider's mouth. The betrayal of emotions had frozen her heart. In response, Arshes summoned giant lightning spirits, turning the dark night sky into a dense electromagnetic field. Lightning streams wrapped around her as if she were the embodiment of the storm. Without flinching at all, Schneider immediately called for the help of fire spirits. The bright red flames blazed, enveloping the space, pushing back the fury of thunder and lightning. The sky was now an arena of two giant forces. On one side were bright lightning columns as if tearing apart the night. On the other were fires rising from the earth, burning everything in their path. Gara, observing from afar, could not help but be amazed. He realized that normally only master wizards could summon one spirit. Yet now both Schneider and Arshes were simultaneously summoning two extremely powerful spirits. The two were not only confronting each other, but also controlling the power of the most powerful elements, as if they were playing a life and death game with all of nature as the board. Arshes, with a determined gaze, was more resolute than ever. She wanted not just a simple victory, but also for the deep dream in her heart. A world where half-bloods like her could live in peace. no longer considered trash by both humans and elves. Since childhood, Arshes had faced contempt and alienation from both sides, thrown into fierce battlefields like someone without value. Now the power of Anslac was her only hope to realize that dream. What few knew was that previously, Schneider had saved her from the abyss of destruction. When Arshes fell into her darkest period, it was Schneider who appeared, bringing her into the arms of protection, giving her a peaceful life for 100 years. That time was not just beautiful memories, but also the foundation for the complex bond between them. Arshes could not deny that, deep in her heart, she still kept those sweet memories, and that made everything even more difficult. Those memories returned to Arshes's mind, not to weaken her, but to activate the accused spell. That cursed spell placed on her to force loyalty began to take effect, compelling her to attack Schneider regardless of personal feelings. Arshes's body seemed no longer under her control, and this significantly increased her power. The sudden change in Arshes's attitude confused Schneider. That inadvertently made him lose focus, unable to maintain control over the fire spirits. The flames seemed to burn in a disorderly manner, no longer obeying their master. Realizing the situation was leaning in her favor, Arshes did not miss the opportunity. She quickly concentrated her power to launch an extremely powerful attack toward Schneider, aiming directly at his weakness. This was not just an ordinary blow, but a technique she believed would be enough to end the duel and defeat the one who had once been her lover. As the battle between Schneider and Arshes reached its peak, the lightning spirits that Arshes had summoned suddenly lost control. Wild lightning bolts began to attack randomly everywhere, striking not just Schneider, but also those observing from afar like Gara and Yoko. The situation became more chaotic than ever as the Thunder Emperor, who was a seasoned wizard, now acted strangely as if unable to control her power. Gara and Yoko, although not directly participating in the battle, but observing everything from afar, felt that something was wrong. Gara, with his years of fighting experience, realized that Arshes, although outwardly showing determination to destroy Schneider, seemed to be conflicted inside. Her eyes reflected complex emotions, as if she were fighting against not only the enemy before her, but also herself. Yoko, since understanding the deep relationship between Schneider and Arshes, could also sense the tearing inside her. This made Yoko more worried for her friend. Both Schneider and Arshes clearly understood that this battle could not be prolonged any further. They simultaneously cast their most powerful spells that could destroy anything in their path. Two enormous streams of power from both sides collided, creating a magnificent and terrifying scene. Magical sparks flew through the air, watermarks appeared on the ground, signaling the inevitable end. In a brief moment, time seemed to stop. Everything became still. It was in that moment that Lucian suddenly appeared before Schneider. He revealed an important secret. Arshes actually did not want to kill Schneider. In fact, she was fighting not out of hatred, but because of the pain of facing a cruel choice. If forced to choose between killing the one she once loved and enduring the torment of the accused curse, Arshes would choose death. Her heart was bound not only by magical power, but also by the conflicting emotions within. Realizing this painful truth, Schneider suddenly came to his senses. He understood that if they continued, both would be killed not only by each other's power, but also by the emotions they could not control. With no other choice, Schneider decided to take a surprising and bold action. In that crucial moment, he used his powerful magic to redirect the entire power of the destructive spell. He sent it elsewhere, away from the battle, to prevent the impending tragedy. However, that was still not enough to free Arshes from the torment of the curse. Schneider knew that the only way to free her from the accused was to sacrifice himself. Without a moment's hesitation, he put his hand to his chest, feeling the final beat of his heart. In a brief but extremely sorrowful moment, Schneider tore his own heart out of his chest, accepting death to dissolve the curse that had weighed on Arshes for so long. Seeing Schneider's sacrificial action, Arshes was astounded. The emotions inside her suddenly exploded, tears rolling down her cold face. All hatred, all internal conflicts seemed to dissolve with the last beat of Schneider's heart. The accused curse was dissolved, and the Thunder Emperor was no longer bound by that dark power. Arshes had just been freed from the ancient curse, accuse, an evil spirit that had been deeply embedded in her finger. Thanks to Schneider's noble sacrifice, the decisive and painful action when Schneider tore his heart from his chest had completely broken the cruel control of the dark soul. Although Arshes was freed, the price Schneider paid was too high. He fell, blood spreading on the ground, while Arshes had to face the emptiness and torment in her mind. The pain of loss and the feeling of guilt clung to her. like a ghost that never disappeared. Schneider's sacrifice inadvertently became an opportunity too good to miss for those conspiring to manipulate from the shadows. Abigail and Kasu, characters loyal to the rebellion, immediately planned to take advantage of the chaotic situation. They deployed a brutal sweeping campaign targeting the remaining royal families, with the ultimate goal of destroying the ancient seals imprisoning Anslac, the terrible god of destruction who had been sealed centuries ago. In a short time, Kasu began to implement the plan by using his unparalleled ice power. He eliminated Prince Cavadel, wiping out his entire kingdom with just a terrible ice storm. Kasu's power turned the entire land into a place with no sign of life. Everything was buried in a white world, frighteningly cold. Meanwhile, Abigail led his army of the undead into a landmine, a rich and powerful kingdom. Without hesitation, Abigail ordered the army to enter the palace where the king and his family were hiding. After a brief battle, Abigail's army quickly killed the king, destroying everything within reach. The third seal was seized. The once powerful kingdom was now just ashes, desolate under the cruel hand of the rebel army. Abigail and Kasu, after having destroyed all the royal kingdoms, now set their eyes on the final target, Metallicana, the land holding the decisive seal to completely resurrect Anslac. They realized that the success of the plan would depend on destroying this final seal. In the deep darkness of calculation, both prepared a powerful army to invade and seize Metallicana. Thick black clouds swirled in the sky of Metallicana as a sign of a terrible disaster about to strike. Facing the impending catastrophe, the king of Metallicana clearly sensed that the war was approaching its most important phase. It was time when everything would be decided, and he could no longer keep the secret. He revealed to the princess the exact location of the final seal. A secret that no one outside the royal family had known for centuries. This was not just the truth about the seal, but also the last hope to protect the kingdom from the impending destructive wave of the rebel army. Outside, the black clouds continued to rise. The world sank in an unusually gloomy scene, forecasting the presence of evil power coming ever closer. Abigail and Kasu's armies were ready to land in Metallicana, preparing to implement the final plan. With his proficiency in ancient magic, Abigail calmly explained to Kasu that breaking the first seal had helped Anslac recover part of his metabolic function. The next two seals further enhanced the mobility and reflexes of this divine destructive entity. The final seal deep within the kingdom of Metallicana would be the key to completing the resurrection process, giving control of Anslac's entire mind and body to the enemy. In another corner of the battlefield, Yoko was still by the side of Dark Schneider's body, someone she always believed would soon return. Because in her heart, besides the deep emotional connection, he still owed her 500 yen, a small debt but a hope she clung to. Although Schneider's body remained still, Yoko never gave up the belief that he would come back to pay that debt. Suddenly, a miracle occurred. His body began to glow. A powerful light burst forth, stunning everyone around. To the astonishment of the witnesses, Dark Schneider's form gradually changed. There was only one way, and that was the reborn Duel. Black clouds continued to fill the sky of Metallicana. The darkness of death was enveloping, and the cruel army was approaching. There was not much time. Metallicana was facing the most devastating fury they had ever known. Abigail, with his bottomless greed and superior knowledge of magic, knew that victory was within reach. He analyzed deeper with Kasu, clearly pointing out that when destroying the final seal, he would have the ability to control the entire body and mind of Anslac. The undead army under Abigail's command advanced toward Metallicana at an unstoppable speed, ready to crush anything in their way. Abigail was a being of terrifying power, no less than Jamon, one of the most powerful opponents that Gara and Arshes had ever faced. Even more frightening was that Abigail wore the Nightmare Devil armor, capable of repelling and neutralizing all types of magic, turning him into an almost invincible fighting machine. As Anslac, the god of destruction, began to awaken, dark power enveloped the entire space. Waves of dark energy spread out, submerging the sky in pitch-black darkness. Not only Abigail but those allied with the dark forces were also infused with an endless source of dark power, significantly increasing their strength and fighting ability. While Abigail was leading the army straight to Metallicana, Gara and Asnai had deployed all their attack capabilities against Lin. This enemy wore the mysterious devil armor, making him one of the most formidable opponents. Both had put all their strength into using the most powerful magic accumulated over hundreds of years, but every attack was like a breeze passing through the armor. The devil armor not only withstood magic, but seemed to absorb the dark energy around, turning Lin into an incredibly powerful entity far beyond imagination. Although the two coordinated extremely smoothly, they felt helpless when faced with Lin's frightening hardness. In their hearts, they understood that defeating this enemy would be an unprecedented challenge in their lives. Elsewhere, Schneider, who seemed to have been swept away by death, unexpectedly returned. However, it was not due to a miraculous wonder or the power of darkness that he was resurrected. This miracle actually came from Yoko, who had awakened him with angry, heaven-sent slaps. Her fury, miraculously, had brought him back from the dead. Schneider, after enduring Yoko's wrath, suddenly opened his eyes as if his entire body and mind had been completely awakened. Contrary to the expectations of many, dark magic was not the reason he came back to life, but rather his determination and the powerful connection with Yoko and his fighting comrades that had made it happen. Standing up, Schneider clearly felt power surging within him. He knew that this power came not only from himself, but also from Yoko's trust and deep affection for him. Lin, a product of a dark ritual performed by the evil dwarf wizard, was the embodiment of unimaginable horror. The dwarf wizard, with his cunning intelligence and boundless thirst for power, had used a soul-summoning ritual to create Lin, an undead warrior, assembled from body parts of the 100 most valiant warriors in history. Lin not only carried the superior strength of these brave warriors, but was also given the fearsome devil armor by the dwarf wizard, a treasure bestowed by Abigail himself. This armor was not only invulnerable, but also had the ability to absorb magical attacks, turning Lin into an invincible war machine, spreading fear everywhere. Ignoring the venomous taunts from the dwarf wizard, Arshes and Gara, two skilled warriors with legendary magical powers, decided to deploy their strongest techniques simultaneously. They knew there could be no concession before this fearsome enemy. Bursts of energy exploded brilliantly in the sky, carrying destruction directly toward Lin. However, despite the perfect combination of Gara's physical strength and Arshes's magic, Lin stood firm like an immovable statue amid the storm. The devil armor protected Lin from all attacks, leaving Arshes and Gara helpless before the enemy's durability and fearsome nature. While the two had not yet found a new strategy, the dwarf wizard, the one behind all the dark conspiracies, flashed an arrogant smile. The evil dwarf wizard ordered Lin to attack with the goal of destroying both Arshes and Gara right on the battlefield. Hatred and absolute loyalty to his master made Lin not hesitate to prepare a finishing blow. Rays of light from his fiery red eyes flashed, signaling the brutal attack about to take place, while the devil armor reflected the light of the gloomy sky. In that moment, all of Metallicana seemed to hold its breath, as the battle had reached the point of no return. In the critical moment when life and death were just inches apart, a sudden whirlwind struck. Schneider, with lightning speed, appeared powerfully. Without warning, he lunged straight at Lin, knocking the enemy away with a sudden and precise attack. With intense concentration, he recited a powerful ancient language spell he had never used before. The spell echoed powerfully, causing the surrounding space to tremble, so heavy that even the demonic creatures had to pause for a moment. A large explosion suddenly erupted right after the spell was completed. Dazzling light enveloped the battlefield, powerful enough to push back all enemies within its influence. As the dust gradually dissipated, it revealed Schneider standing proudly amid the ruins of the battlefield. Gara, witnessing the powerful scene from afar, could not help but burst with joy. He was happy not only because his leader was alive, but also because of the divine power that Schneider had achieved, seemingly transcending all normal limits. Other warriors, though exhausted, could not hide their excitement. Meanwhile, Arshes, swept away by intense emotions, could not contain her joy. She rushed toward Schneider, embracing him in indescribable happiness. The warmth from him carried countless memories and feelings that had been hidden for so long. Despite many conflicts in the past, this moment was proof of Arshes's enduring love for Schneider, a love that overcame all obstacles. This resounding victory not only marked a turning point in the battle, but was also a historic event for Metallicana. People from all over flocked to the grand square, cheering and celebrating Schneider, the kingdom's hero. His appearance had brought hope for a better future after months of turmoil and suffering. They hailed him as a savior, someone who had defeated the dark forces, bringing peace to Metallicana. However, amid that joyful atmosphere, High Priest Ken and Warrior Kongu still harbored deep concerns. They noticed that the power Schneider possessed was not merely from his strong will or superior skills. There was something unusual, a dark energy hidden inside him. Both suspected that the awakening of Anslac, the sealed god of destruction, might have inadvertently activated a potential power within Schneider. That night, in a strange effort to settle an old debt, Schneider decided to disguise himself as Santa Claus, sneaking into Yoko's room to return the 500 yen he had borrowed earlier. However, the situation did not go as smoothly as he had planned. Yoko not only demanded the debt back, but also required Schneider to pay additional interest that she had arbitrarily set. Unfortunately, Schneider had no money in his pocket at that time. Faced with this awkward situation, he came up with a completely bizarre plan to pay the interest, proposing to settle it by using his own body. However, this plan immediately failed when Yoko, without hesitation, gave him a heaven-sent blow from her familiar club, making Schneider fall and writhe in pain. While Schneider was enduring Yoko's wrath, a much more serious crisis was emerging. In a distant place, Abigail was extremely angry upon hearing about the defeat of the undead army. Unable to contain his fury, he immediately ordered a large-scale attack on Metallicana, plunging the entire city into unprecedented chaos. This time, the force leading the invasion was a giant one-eyed warrior, carrying with him the infamous Devil Mace, one of the powerful weapons belonging to the 3 evil weapons set. Notably, the evil dwarf wizard had been assigned the task of controlling this one-eyed warrior. He did not hesitate to order the soldiers under his command to destroy everything in their path and mercilessly massacre Metallicana civilians. Tensions escalated when the dwarf wizard coldly approached an innocent girl, with the barbaric intention of gouging out her eyes for amusement. At the most dangerous moment, Schneider appeared like a lightning bolt, stopping the wizard's cruel act before he could carry it out. The dwarf wizard, though laughing arrogantly at Schneider's appearance, quickly realized that all his attacks were useless against the opponent's power. Enraged at being looked down upon, the dwarf wizard ordered the one-eyed warrior to attack Schneider to eliminate this threat. The one-eyed warrior, with his enormous size and superior strength, delivered powerful blows. However, Schneider did not flinch, skillfully using the artillery spell, quickly pushing back and defeating the giant monster in the blink of an eye. But just as everyone was sighing with relief, a horrifying transformation occurred. The body of the one-eyed warrior began to recover rapidly, the wounds on his flesh healing immediately. Not stopping there, it began to transform, becoming many times more terrifying and fearsome, as if infused with a new source of dark power. Under the terrifying weight of the devil mace from the one-eyed warrior, the ground violently shook. Giant stone pillars emerged, breaking the surrounding space, pulling Schneider deep into the earth, burying him in a gigantic chaos of soil, rocks, and rubble. However, this temporary burial was just a trivial game for Schneider. Without needing any help, he gradually escaped from the giant rocks, his body unharmed. With a determined look and a challenging half-smile, he immediately counterattacked. Without delay, Schneider raised his hand to the sky, calling forth burning magical flames. Soon after, a blazing fire, larger than any fire ever before, erupted, surrounding the enemy. The one-eyed warrior, with his giant body and frightening regenerative ability, was submerged in a sea of bright red fire, turning into a pile of ashes in the blink of an eye. However, the most bizarre and terrifying thing continued to happen. The cells of the god Anslac inside him began to function, rapidly regenerating the body. Not simply healing wounds, the monster mutated once more. His body developed new layers of armor, hard and full of sharp spikes. His power now exceeded the limits of any enemy Schneider had ever faced. Gara, observing the battle's development from afar, could not sit still. Sensing the increasing level of danger, he planned to plunge into the fight to help Schneider defeat the monster. However, before Gara could act, Schneider turned his head back and gestured to stop him. With a determined look, he wanted to affirm that this was his own battle. He would not let anyone interfere. Meanwhile, the one-eyed warrior had accumulated more power. His fiery red eyes lit up along with the devil mace, which was fully charged with dark energy. With a terrifying blow, he struck the mace to the ground, creating a horrifying explosion. The ground shook beneath their feet. Huge shock waves destroyed everything around, and a large part of the city of Metallicana was destroyed instantly. Skyscraper buildings collapsed in thunderous explosions. The ground split open, creating deep holes with long cracks running across the roads. Nevertheless, Schneider, with superior combat skills and battlefield experience, moved like the wind, easily avoiding that destructive attack, jumping over the collapsed rocks and debris with precision and smoothness. Amid the desolate scene, a strange thing gradually became clear. Schneider, with his keen observant eye, realized that the giant body of the one-eyed warrior was beginning to show signs of disorder. The cells of the god Anslac grafted into the monster's body, once an infinite source of power, were now being rejected by the undead body itself. The giant monster had now become slower. The combination of divine and monstrous was no longer as perfect as before. This was the opportunity Schneider had been waiting for. Noticing clear signs of weakness from the enemy, Schneider quickly decided to change tactic. Instead of continuing to match strength with conventional physical attacks, he switched to a more skillful fighting style, exploiting the opponent's tactical weaknesses. With a loud, spirited shout, he signaled for Gara and Arshes to immediately join the battle. The three no longer acted individually, but this time coordinated closely, like three branches of an invincible force. Gara, with ruthless and precise fighting skills, decisively attacked the weakest positions of the monster. Meanwhile, Arshes summoned fierce lightning streams. Each lightning bolt was like a fatal blow, completely paralyzing the opponent's defensive capabilities. With his teammates significantly weakening the monster, Schneider had enough time to concentrate energy and begin the incantation for an ancient magic, a type of forbidden spell with terrible power. Once sealed due to the risk of destruction it brought, the spell echoed in space as if every dust particle, every inch of earth could feel its potential power. Immediately, a giant stream of magical fire erupted, burning the enemy to the core. The hideous body of the monster was burned, then gradually melted under the irresistible heat, finally turning into dust particles flying in the air. It seemed the battle had ended with the monster's death, but an unexpected event occurred. The activation of the forbidden spell not only destroyed the opponent but also created a tear in space, opening a gateway to another dimension, a world of endless darkness. The commander behind, the dwarf wizard, who was controlling the battle from afar, could not react to that sudden power. His entire body was sucked into the dark gateway, swept away from this world without a chance to resist. His curses dissolved in the dim void, and in the blink of an eye, his figure disappeared, with no possibility of returning to the real world. Although this magic brought victory, Schneider clearly understood the potential danger involved in using it. This forbidden spell was not only powerful but also extremely dangerous for the caster. Just a small mistake in the casting process could lead to the complete collapse of not only the caster but everything around. That was why this forbidden spell had been sealed for many centuries and was hardly recorded or propagated. Its deadly weakness lay in the too long casting time and the requirement for absolute concentration. Any distraction, even for a split second, could lead to disaster. After 2 consecutive bitter defeats, Abigail became increasingly impatient and obsessed with revenge. The hatred in him never subsided. The leader of the Dark Army began to plot more dangerously than ever, planning to summon one of the most powerful creatures in his undead army, an entity possessing immensely powerful magic and an almost immortal body. This was someone not only physically strong, but also equipped with dark secret techniques that few could resist. Currently, this terrifying creature was being held deep in an underground labyrinth, a mysterious place located in the remote western part of the kingdom of Metallicana. This labyrinth had existed for centuries, protected by ancient curses that no explorer had ever survived after venturing into it. That place was hidden from the world's attention. No one knew of its existence except Abigail and his most loyal subordinates. As Abigail continued to implement his dark plan, an unusual phenomenon appeared in the western part of Metallicana. The clear blue sky turned pitch black, carrying the sign of a giant storm. Black clouds swirled, covering the sky, heralding the approaching disaster. The speed at which the storm formed terrified all who witnessed it. The space was submerged in furious winds and continuous thunder and lightning. That haunting scene foretold a destructive event about to happen, which no one could prevent. Strong gusts of wind swept away everything in their path. Surrounding villages were wiped out in the blink of an eye. The storm was like a great flood of nature's fury, devastating tirelessly. The entire sky of Metallicana was plunged into darkness. The fury of wind and lightning swept through residential areas, turning peaceful streets into desolate wastelands. The screams of people echoed everywhere as they ran in panic with desperate terror. There was no safe place, no escape from the storm that was ravaging madly. The storm carried terrible power beyond what anyone could imagine. Trees were knocked down, houses were uprooted from their foundations, and roads were cut by deep, bottomless cracks. The people of Metallicana kept calling for help, while the brave warriors of the kingdom tried to face the destruction happening right before their eyes. However, before the superior power of nature, all resistance efforts became meaningless. Not magic, not swords, no power was enough to resist the storm's devastation. Those lucky enough to escape the disaster recounted their stories with unprecedented fear. In the heart of the storm, when lightning tore through the pitch-black sky, she didn't feel comfortable with this life. The fiery red eyes, like two red-hot coals of a monster from the realm of the dead, glowed eerily. A form like the Grim Reaper standing amid the storm conveyed indescribable horror to those who saw it. The High Priest had issued a warning. The world was being enveloped by the rise of countless evil entities. However, the most frightening were not ordinary demons, but those who had achieved immortality through mysterious magical rituals. They existed beyond all laws of nature, and among them, Lick Eddie was the embodiment of that extreme terror. Lick Eddie was not just a powerful creature, but also a symbol of frightening perpetuity through the ages. This creature no longer belonged to the human world. It had become a true demon that had transcended death and oblivion. The legend of Eddie began 50 years ago in the kingdom of Zeverpo, a renowned kingdom with a mild climate, fertile land, and undeniable prosperity. Sakura asked in surprise why the entire kingdom had disappeared from the map, replaced by a desolate, deadly swamp. The fertile fields were now just mud and black water. Plants could not grow. All life had been wiped out. People still could not explain what had happened. But in ancient records, there was mention of a group of 4 wizards and powerful monks, those who had used a forbidden ritual called Megast, a type of dark magic that gave the user immortality. However, the price to pay was terrible. The consequence of that ritual was the appearance of Lick Eddie, a powerful and brutal creature, imprisoned deep underground for decades. While the world thought Lick Eddie had been forever forgotten, fate caused Schneider to inadvertently awaken this disaster. In an adventure exploring ancient ruins, Schneider accidentally activated a sealed power related to the Megast spell, leading to the release of Lick Eddie from his dark prison. Eddie, after years of imprisonment, now returned with hatred and immeasurable power. Life across the lands began to clearly sense the threat. Not just a simple entity, but a nightmare that could wipe out entire kingdoms in the blink of an eye. Recognizing the danger that could not be ignored, Schneider, along with his 2 close comrades, Gara and Arshes, decided to face Lick Eddie. Arshes, a powerful female warrior with dark magic, and Gara, a powerful warrior with skillful swordsmanship, did not hesitate to plunge into the battle against this undefeatable enemy. Schneider understood that this battle would not just be an ordinary fight, but a confrontation between life and death, between light and darkness. The survival of the entire kingdom depended on his determination and skills, along with those of his teammates. Schneider stood in the middle of the battlefield filled with death energy, deciding that he could not let Lick Eddie continue to advance if he wanted to protect his loved ones. He quickly summoned a giant fire barrier, with blazing flames erupting all around the city. The dancing flames in the space glowed like thousands of stars in the night, forming a brilliant defensive wall that seemed impenetrable. Many witnesses had placed hope in this flame, thinking it would slow the advance of the powerful enemy. But what everyone did not expect was Lick Eddie's attitude toward this flame. Without a moment's hesitation, with a cold and confident gaze, he walked straight through the barrier as if it were just a thin mist. The fire had no effect, did not slow the enemy's steps, but on the contrary, only made those who witnessed it more terrified. Lick Eddie, an entity deeply connected to the world of death, continued to demonstrate his superiority. With his skinny hands, he began to deploy a horrifying magical ritual, calling hundreds of wandering evil souls from the underworld. These dark entities carried the breath of extinction. Heavy evil energy covered everything they touched. Anything touched immediately began to decompose, rot, as if its nature was eroded by power from hell. The atmosphere became gloomy and suffocating to the extent that each breath carried the smell of death permeating everywhere in space. Although facing such a terrible flood of souls, Schneider still maintained his composure. He moved with agility amid the attacks, each step showing his extensive combat experience and superior quickness. The seemingly invisible evil souls could not touch him. To Schneider, those wandering souls were just minor dangers, a joke compared to the real threat that Eddie could create. However, the concern was not in dealing with the evil souls, but in how to approach and defeat Lick Eddie, a dangerous enemy with unfathomable power. As someone holding power from forbidden rituals with mysterious magic, Eddie had created an invisible layer of protection around himself. That shield was not a physical wall, but an almost perfect magical barrier. Any magical attack that Schneider launched was stopped as soon as it reached this protective layer. Activating a trap to bring a card onto the field was neutralized in an instant, making his efforts seem useless. Not stopping there, Lick Eddie took from his hand a ring, a dark weapon full of power. The last item in the set of 3 evil weapons, the darkest treasures created by ancient wizards. The ring with its frightening power helped Eddie cast a more dangerous type of magic than ever. With an evil incantation, Eddie created a gigantic black hole in front of him, where anything could be sucked in with no way out. This black hole was not simply a container of chaos. It also had the ability to transport targets to another space, a place from which no one could survive and return. Schneider, although having faced many formidable opponents, now faced a completely different danger. The terrible black hole sucked him into its vortex. The pull from it increased every second, gradually pulling his body toward the infinite space, where darkness and destruction awaited. Although he strained to resist, his resistance became increasingly weak before the irresistible power. Witnessing her comrade in a hair's-breadth situation, Arshes could not sit still. Loyalty, the affection between her and Schneider, and the determination to protect the person she had always admired compelled Arshes to rush without hesitation straight toward the black hole. Although knowing clearly that confronting that mysterious power could lead to death or worse, being submerged in an abyss with no escape, Arshes remained determined to save Schneider. The vortex from the black hole was so ferocious that it did not allow anyone to resist. Although using all her strength to fight against it, Arshes still could not withstand the increasingly growing pull. In a brief moment, both were sucked into the heart of the black hole, disappearing without a trace before the astonishment and desperation of those remaining on the battlefield. Their silhouettes quickly sank into the dark space, where no one knew what was waiting. At this moment, in the palace, Yoko was running to the underground basement, where 2 of the 3 evil weapons that they had won from previous battles were kept. A feeling of coldness crept into her every step. Suddenly, amid that dark night, a familiar figure gradually appeared. Abigail, the prophet and evil enemy of the realm, stood there with a sinister smile as if he had predicted everything. Beside him, 2 objects carrying dark power appeared hazily. The giant devil armor and the demonic mace, 2 ancient artifacts carrying ancient power that could overturn the world order. Yoko stood face to face with one of the 4 heavenly kings with amazing calmness. There was no sign of trembling or worry on her face. On the contrary, Yoko's gaze was full of confidence and challenge, making Abigail, a powerful and cruel being, somewhat waver. That serene attitude surprised him, as he rarely encountered an opponent who dared to look straight into his eyes without flinching. Yoko, although facing a terrifying threat from a dark force like Abigail, remained firmly unyielding. She calmly responded to all threats, making the enemy wary of her strength and unwavering courage. Meanwhile, Gara, from not too far a distance, observed the developments of the confrontation. Despite the critical situation, Gara's faith was not shaken. He knew that Schneider and Arshes, though having gone through fierce battles, still existed. The belief in their survival was the flame that ignited the will in Gara, helping him stand firm against all challenges. Knowing that he could not let the situation worsen, Gara decided to face Lick Eddie, the fearsome immortal enemy. With no choice other than to use the legendary sword Masamon, a weapon known for its ability to destroy evil through generations. Gara did not hesitate, skillfully applying all his skills when executing the true demon god sword technique. The Masamon sword in his hand rose with invisible speed, cutting a sharp path through Lick Eddie's body. However, when the sword stroke ended, Gara discovered that the cut had not caused any damage to the opponent. Lick Eddie, with his fearsome immortality, stood still as if nothing had happened. In that brief moment, he teleported instantly behind Gara, preparing to counterattack with a terrible dark magic. Immediately, an invisible stream of power blew Gara away, throwing him toward the rock wall. The strong impact made Gara's body feel crushed. Pain spread throughout his muscles, but he still did not let go of the sword in his hand. Amid the heavy atmosphere and destruction everywhere, everything seemed to have ended. However, Gara clearly understood that this was not the time to give up. Facing an immortal like Eddie, there was only one way: to activate the supreme power of the Masamon sword. This was not just an ordinary weapon. Deep within it was the ability to destroy evil, a hidden power that could completely eliminate evil entities. However, the price to pay for using this power was not small. The user would be drained of life force, facing inevitable death. Without hesitation, Gara decided to venture into the final battle. He knew that to destroy Lick Eddie and save Schneider and Arshes, he had to be ready to sacrifice everything. Gara, with all his life force drained by Masamon, still maintained his will. Although his body had nearly exceeded its endurance limit, the terrible power of Masamune rose, exploding inside Gara. But not long after, he received another attack from Lickety. Pain engulfed him, but Gara did not stop. He concentrated all his remaining power into the sword, moving with invisible speed, then delivered a series of destructive cuts aimed directly at Lickety's body, hoping this technique would destroy him. However, something unexpected happened. Because Masamune had drawn away part of Gara's power to activate its forbidden ability. His cuts, though having terrible power, were still not enough to defeat Lickety. Moreover, Gara's body, after enduring terrible injuries, was almost exhausted. In that moment, just a light blow from Lickety could take his life. Just when it was Kika's turn, she only needed to use one card to blow away 3 of his lives, erasing all physical pain with indomitable spiritual strength. With the Masamune sword in hand, he once again decided to launch his ultimate technique, the Konvan Devil Eye Sword. That sword path was so sharp that it broke through all magical barriers, destroying Lickety's immortal power, something that seemed impossible. But Eddie, with his inherent cunning, quickly summoned the power of the Dark Ring, trying to regenerate to turn the tide. He did not know that using this demonic ring inadvertently activated a sealed barrier. From within the hazy mist of the dark barrier, the Thunder Beast, a creature carrying within it mysterious lightning power, suddenly appeared, lunging straight toward Lickety. Not giving the opponent time to react, the Thunder Beast attacked with a poisonous lightning bite, tearing the Death God's shoulder, causing Eddie to lose balance and stagger back. Sudden pain spread throughout his body, along with panic as he had to face 2 other entities that also appeared suddenly. The Fire Demon, the embodiment of power from Hellfire, and Arshes, the sorceress with transcendent power. The simultaneous appearance of all 3 entities put Lickety in a completely passive position, making it difficult to find an effective way to deal with them. While Eddie was still coping with these 3 threats, from afar, the image of Dark Schneider appeared like a storm, sweeping away all hope of survival from the enemy. Schneider's return was not simply the return of a powerful warrior, but a flame of rage burning inside him as he witnessed Gara, his close comrade, bearing heavy wounds. Without hesitation, Schneider gripped the Flame God's sword, an infinite source of power, then rushed toward Eddie like a furious tornado. Each sword stroke he delivered carried the utmost determination, cutting deep into the immortal soul of Eddie. Unable to resist this terrible power, Lickety's soul gradually dispersed, fading into the air. Each piece of the soul disintegrated, with no chance to regenerate. When the final roar from Eddie sounded and then sank into nothingness, the atmosphere around also gradually settled. The battle ended with Dark Schneider's glorious victory, but that did not make him forget the sacrifice that Gara had endured throughout the battle. Although the mission to destroy Lickety had been completed, Schneider still turned to his comrade, his eyes looking into the distance as if wanting to say goodbye. The words from his mouth, though brief and not overly emotional, contained respect for Gara. However, just when everyone thought Gara had sacrificed himself, an unexpected event occurred. Gara, in an indescribable astonishment, waited for Kiko's turn to bring Helmina back thanks to the power of the territory. He began to scold Schneider with a series of sharp rebukes, surprising all witnesses. Gara's weak but determined voice sounded as he began to talk about the strange thing that had happened in the final moment. In his second execution of the Konvan Devil Eye Sword technique, Gara felt a great change. The Masamune sword, the legendary weapon that had fought alongside him all this time, seemed to have recognized Gara as its true master. Instead of continuing to drain his life force as before, the sword began to return all the energy it had taken. This miracle not only helped Gara escape death within a hair's breadth, but also completely restored both his physical and mental state. Before the astonished eyes of the witnesses, Gara, with abundant vitality, as if he had never gone through any injury, stood proudly looking straight at Schneider. In his eyes was clearly a subtle challenge, an unspoken declaration of war between 2 companions. Afterward, Lickety's ring automatically flew toward the palace. Combining with the 2 remaining magical weapons in the legendary trio, Abigail immediately realized the dark truth. The fact that Eddie had been eliminated from the game was no longer a hypothesis. It was a harsh reality, signaling that one of his most powerful allies had completely disappeared from the battle. Without needing any speculation, Abigail clearly understood that the battle situation was turning unfavorable. He had to act quickly if he didn't want to share the same fate. Recognizing the critical level of the situation, Abigail could not hesitate any longer. Leaving the storage basement where he had been temporarily hiding, he decided to step out with a new plan to regain control and continue strengthening the attack. He knew he no longer had time to hesitate or rely on the power of other allies. Now, everything depended on him and the magical weapons he possessed. On his way through the gloomy corridors, Abigail was suddenly ambushed by Metallicana's soldiers. These soldiers, although knowing that the enemy before them was superior in power, did not back down. With courageous spirit and unwavering will, they tried to block Abigail's path at all costs, but facing his demonic tentacle armor, all their efforts were like eggs thrown against stone. Abigail, in his evil armor, did not need much effort. The tentacles extended like living monsters, grabbing and crushing each soldier in an instant. The swords and shields of Metallicana's soldiers could not harm him. Each time the tentacle armor swung, the enemies before him vanished in a shower of blood and screams of pain. While Abigail continued his path of destruction, Arshes, with the sharp intuition of a veteran sorcerer, sensed the uneasiness spreading throughout the castle. Her intuition could not be mistaken. Something terrible was happening in the deep underground. Without hesitation, she hurriedly moved toward the basement to check the situation. Arshes's heart beat faster as she approached the area where the feeling of uneasiness was becoming more apparent than ever. When she arrived, the scene before her eyes stunned her. Right in front of Arshes, Abigail, whom she had once considered a reliable ally, someone who had fought alongside her in countless battles, now stood amid devastation, with blood and flesh scattered everywhere. The tentacles of his demonic armor continuously operated, tearing apart anyone who dared to block his way. Abigail, who had once been a companion, had now become a monster without any humanity, calmly destroying everything in sight. Arshes's eyes revealed horror and anger. Abigail's betrayal was too clear, but witnessing firsthand his merciless slaughter made her unable to contain her emotions. The old colleague, someone she had once trusted, was no longer the person she had known. Before her was only a dangerous enemy, a brutal entity ready to destroy anyone who did not submit. Arshes decided to confront Abigail not only to settle the debt of the accused spell she had once endured, but also to question him about an extremely serious matter. If Abigail intentionally kept his mouth shut, Arshes was ready to use force to compel him to reveal the truth she wanted to know. Meanwhile, Abigail was very confident in his power, especially when he possessed the strange tentacle armor. This armor was not just a living fighting machine based on magic, but it also played the role of a lightning rod, capable of neutralizing all lightning attacks that Thunder Emperor Arshes could launch. Deep down, Abigail firmly believed that Arshes could not do anything against him with this special weapon. Arshes, aware of the dangerous situation, decided to concentrate all her power into one powerful attack. She began to recite a spell, activating one of the most powerful lightning spells she had in her magic arsenal. Despite Abigail's resistance, a giant lightning bolt cut across the sky and struck directly at the target. The damage was immense, affecting not only the opponent but also harming the caster herself. However, somehow, Abigail still stood firm amid the battlefield, completely unharmed. Although it seemed like the attack had not achieved the expected result, Arshes had anticipated this possibility. She did not get discouraged. Instead, she continued to launch another magical attack, violently spinning and blowing Abigail away. The whirlwind carried power not only to destroy but also to weaken the opponent, putting him at a disadvantage for a moment. While the battle between Arshes and Abigail was intensely ongoing, elsewhere, the old general, who had always been plotting for himself, began to whisper to the king. He conspired to suggest ways for the king to eliminate Dark Schneider and the 4 heavenly kings under his command, with the ultimate goal of removing all threats to the throne and paving the way for his own selfish plans. Dark Schneider, coincidentally present nearby, was calmly enjoying a bowl of instant noodles, observing the developments of the battle from afar. While the old general stood nearby, silently plotting with the king, Schneider could not contain his anger at the general's insidious schemes. He decided to act without thinking further, in a very carefree and humorous style. Holding the hot bowl of noodles, Schneider suddenly dumped it directly on the old general's head, causing the noodle soup to spill all over him. This action not only angered and confused the old general, but was also a clear warning about the habit of fishing in troubled waters. Meanwhile, Abigail was in the middle of a fierce battle with Arshes. After receiving the terrible power from her heavenly dragon energy attack, he fell into an extremely dangerous situation. Abigail could not avoid having to endure the full power from the sharp whirlwind launched by Arshes. The cutting force of the whirlwind penetrated the protective armor, causing serious injury to his body. Not missing the opportunity, Arshes immediately seized the moment to finish the battle. With a cold and decisive demeanor, she summoned the Thunder Beast, a legendary creature created from thunder and lightning. Right after, Arshes ordered the Thunder Beast to transform into the Thunder God Sword, a powerful sword forged from lightning power itself. Now in her hand was a legendary weapon full of power. Arshes rushed straight toward Abigail, who had once been her ally in the dark path. Without hesitation, she swung the Thunder God Sword up, delivering a finishing blow. Arshes's eyes lit up with determination, the desire to end this dark connection forever. At this moment, in the royal palace, Princess Sheila, with a face tinged with deep sadness and eyes filled with thousands of thoughts, began to tell Schneider a story that had been forgotten in the flow of time. The story she was about to share was not only a secret of the royal family, but also a dark truth that had shaped the fate of the entire continent for many centuries. According to her, the four most ancient royal families on this continent were not simply noble lineages, but also those chosen from the primordial period of the world. Their sacred mission was not to rule, but to keep the great seal of the god of destruction from being broken. This was not a choice but a harsh destiny, entrusted by the gods from the time when human civilization was just beginning. Each royal family among these four lineages had passed down through many generations their special sealing power. Each part of the seal was preserved in the blood and soul of the royal members, with the responsibility of maintaining the balance between forces. It was an invisible burden but extremely frightening, because if just one seal was destroyed, the appearance of the god of destruction would be inevitable, pushing the entire world into the abyss of extinction. When reaching the end of the story, Sheila's voice suddenly became choked, and her gaze turned to a gloomy color, as if she was about to utter the most terrifying secret. With a low and slow tone, she revealed that the final seal, the most important piece to keep the god of destruction in deep sleep, was not an ancient artifact forgotten in some desolate temple or cave, but it was her. Sheila's body, herself, was the final key keeping the god of destruction imprisoned. If this seal was broken, her life would no longer be her own, and the world would face the risk of destruction. When mentioning this truth, Sheila's body trembled. Her voice lowered, but still emanated a strong determination. She knew that this responsibility was too great for anyone. Her sacrifice might be inevitable. However, her eyes lit up with a ray of hope when looking at Schneider. Sheila understood that the only one who could prevent this disaster was Dark Schneider, in whom she had placed all her trust. Not because he was the greatest warrior or because he owed her any debt, but because from the depths of her soul, Sheila could feel the power of steadfastness and indomitable spirit in him. Only Dark Schneider, with his unparalleled courage, had the ability to confront the dark forces that were gradually rising. Schneider, after listening to the sincere words from the princess, agreed to accept this mission. This decision did not stem from pity or personal obligation to Sheila, but from respect for her courage and sacrifice. He had faced countless challenges, including rescuing Yoko from Gara's fortress, but this time he felt that the responsibility on his shoulders was heavier than ever. Scene change. The gloomy sky covered when the peak battle between Schneider and the new enemy began. The opponent was none other than Abigail, who was now not like before. With the combination of the legendary Thunder God Sword and the three evil weapons, Abigail had evolved into a super dark form with more terrifying power than at any time before. His entire body seemed to be covered by a dark energy stream. Each sword stroke unleashed seemed to tear apart space, creating shockwaves spreading across the battlefield. Arshes stood far away, reading the situation and predicting. She believed that Abigail was using an ancient type of magic, a magic far beyond the capability of any human. This type of magic was not created by Abigail himself, but could be the result of a connection with a power from the ancient world. Arshes decided to pull Abigail out of the suffocating space inside the fortress to fully unleash the power of the Thunder God Sword. The opponent had prepared for the battle, but his target fell right into Arshes's sight. Without hesitation, she immediately rushed in, delivering a series of powerful attacks, hoping to push back the enemy. However, the devil armor that Abigail wore completely neutralized all her techniques. The attacks seemed not to sway the demonic protective layer surrounding his body, making Arshes wary of this power. Realizing that the battle was leaning in his favor, Abigail confidently flashed a sinister smile and revealed the entire cruel conspiracy. The story about resurrecting Anslac to create a peaceful world was just a cover, a blatant lie. The real plan that Abigail pursued was to help the god of destruction turn everything existing on Earth back to zero. back to the time before life appeared. All his efforts were not aimed at peace, but at destroying everything, wiping out everything. While Abigail was immersed in the feeling of victory, proud as his sinister plot was gradually revealed, a giant black shadow suddenly approached from afar. None other than Schneider, who had silently controlled a giant golem to approach the opponent without making any noise. The golem, with its enormous size and superior strength, rushed forward and suddenly delivered a heaven-sent punch to Abigail's face. This powerful attack not only made the enemy stagger, but also revealed his true face from the protective iron armor. Recognizing the surprise, Schneider immediately understood that this was Abigail's fatal weakness. The enemy's entire body was covered by solid armor, with only the face as the most vulnerable part, a point he had not yet carefully protected. Schneider's eyes flashed with hope as he realized he could take advantage of this opportunity to turn the tide. However, Abigail, although hit by a surprise attack, was not an easy person to defeat. Clearly aware of the threat facing him, he immediately switched to a more vicious strategy. Instead of continuing to confront directly, Abigail suddenly grabbed Arshes, who was standing nearby, and turned her into a hostage. He pulled her close, using Arshes as a living shield, forcing Schneider into a difficult situation. Everyone witnessed that horrifying scene. At that moment, the entire battle seemed to be immediately suspended. Silence enveloped the entire space, while Abigail stood there with a triumphant look on his face. The situation became even more tense when Schneider, who had been regarded as the world's strongest wizard, suddenly knelt before Abigail. This was an unprecedented scene, a proud warrior famous for his self-respect and determination, now bowing his head to the enemy. The eyes of all witnesses were filled with astonishment. No one could believe that Schneider, who was honored as a god among humans, now submitted to Abigail. The villain's arrogance quickly exploded. He could not hide his glee when seeing the famous opponent now begging before him. Believing he had completely gained victory, Abigail laughed loudly in ultimate satisfaction, without any doubt about what might happen next. But just in the moment when Abigail was careless, Schneider suddenly counterattacked with an unexpected strike. He secretly ordered the giant golem to attack once more. The golem, without hesitation, delivered the next punch aimed directly at Abigail's bare face. This sudden and powerful blow not only stunned the enemy but also helped free Arshes from danger. The smooth coordination between Schneider and the golem clearly demonstrated his talent in combat and calmness, even in the most difficult circumstances. With no barriers left to stop him, Schneider quickly reached a state of high concentration. All of Schneider's magical power and fighting will were directed at the enemy before him, Abigail. Without hesitation, Schneider prepared to unleash all the strongest techniques in his magic arsenal, determined to show no mercy. Facing the overwhelming presence of the giant golem controlled by Schneider, Abigail began to sense the danger gradually enveloping him. In this close battle, he realized that his opponent was not as easily defeated as he had thought. Seeing the situation becoming more dangerous, Abigail decided not to delay any longer. He immediately summoned one of the supreme spells he had learned from the ancient world. A destructive lightning bolt suddenly erupted with terrifying power, tearing through space and lunging straight at the golem, causing Schneider's giant machine to be destroyed after just a single blow. Seeing the battle seemingly leaning in his favor, Abigail became more arrogant than ever. Confident in his superior ability, he began to taunt, ordering Schneider to submit if he wanted to be spared. Contempt was clearly displayed on the enemy's face, as if he believed his arrogance could break anyone's will. However, in response to those challenging words, Schneider just stood silently for a moment, before a cold and determined look appeared clearly on his face. Without wavering before the opponent's power, he flatly refused, declaring in a voice full of determination that he would never submit to the enemy. The sense of self-respect and pride in Schneider exploded powerfully, pushing him into a metaphysical dark state, the supreme fighting state of the highest wizards. All techniques and magical power within him were activated, preparing for a life-or-death duel with no retreat. The battle gradually became more fierce as both pushed their power to the limit. Before the eyes of the observing warriors, no one could be sure which side would win. However, when everyone seemed to believe that the battle was coming to an end, that Schneider might have been defeated, something unimaginable happened. From amid the ruins, Schneider suddenly stood up. Despite injuries, his body was still full of vitality, his eyes blazing, his muscles flexing. And with a power far beyond imagination, he lifted Abigail's massive body off the ground. In the storm of exploding power, Schneider was no longer an ordinary human. Now he had completely surpassed the limits of an ordinary wizard, transforming into a divine warrior carrying within him the power of ancient gods. His body emitted a dazzling light, sparkling like lightning in the dark night sky. Each blow he delivered was not simply a physical attack anymore, but contained fury, resentment, and the pain of someone fighting for what he loved: the world, his loved ones, and his own honor. That power made Abigail, a cruel, cold, and powerful being, now standing before his opponent, feel real fear. Not stopping, Schneider continued to summon an ancient language spell that only the most powerful wizards could control. It was a supreme magic containing destructive power. In an instant, a giant dark barrier surrounded Abigail like a death net, slowly tightening. Not simply an enclosure, this barrier was alive like a sentient creature, beginning to slowly gnaw at the traitor's body. His skin and flesh were swallowed bit by bit, slowly but surely. Abigail's painful screams echoed in the gloomy space. Each sound was like a desperate cry for help, but no one came to rescue him from his predestined fate. The barrier's power was too great. There was no chance for escape. All hope vanished under the powerful light of the magic Schneider created. In the moment when everything seemed to have ended, when the tense atmosphere began to settle, something unexpected happened. Princess Sheila's body, which had endured the imprisonment of the ancient seal for centuries, suddenly experienced a violent reaction. Inside her, the ancient power hidden for too long was now stirred by uncontrollable violent emotions. The tension in the battle, combined with the fear and pain she had to endure, had inadvertently released part of the power of the seal keeping Anslac, a dark monster, imprisoned for centuries. In those few seconds, both sides received a powerful stream of dark energy, creating an opportunity for Abigail and Anslac to break the seal. The event happened too quickly for Schneider to react. With the awakened power, Abigail rushed to attack without hesitation, quickly seizing an opportunity that no one could prevent. The sudden attack caused Schneider to be pushed back, and in a painful moment, Abigail took away his left leg with a fierce attack that no one could have anticipated. Abigail continued to rain down on Schneider powerful attacks, as if wanting to crush all the power and fighting will of his opponent. Each of his blows was like a hammer strike. Each time they hit Schneider's body, they caused him extreme pain. The image of the once powerful hero was now just a shadow of himself. His strong body now had only striped wounds. The skeleton nearly collapsed under the weight of the tortures. Schneider's once confident, proud face was distorted by bruises and blood. He fell, almost unable to stand firm. Abigail, realizing that the biggest threat had been extinguished, shifted his attention to another target. He immediately turned his cold gaze toward Princess Sheila. The insatiable thirst for power and strength surged in Abigail's heart. The tyrant now wanted to seize the secret of the final seal, the most important key to prevent the resurrection of the god of destruction, Anslac. That was power he could not ignore. Abigail, quick as lightning, rushed straight toward Sheila with the intention of breaking the seal hidden inside her body. Each step he took closer, the threat became clearer and more terrifying. In that moment, the image of the long-ago promise to Sheila suddenly flooded back into Schneider's mind. He had once vowed to protect her, to protect the entire world from the cruel hands of dark enemies. Now, when danger was near, he could not let that promise turn to smoke. Despite his devastated body and nearly exhausted power, Schneider still had one thing that Abigail could not break. That was his unyielding fighting spirit that would never fade. When realizing that Abigail was approaching Sheila, Schneider knew he didn't have much time. With each step of the enemy, his heart beat harder, his will boiled, and his rage rose. Although his body was in pain, he could not let himself fall before this great threat. All the remaining power within him was summoned. Waves of powerful magical energy began to gather. All the powerful magical techniques he had accumulated over many years were now concentrated into a stream of magical light. This light not only carried power but also contained all the fury, determination, and unwavering steadfastness of Schneider. In a decisive moment, with a determined gaze directed straight at the enemy, Schneider recited a mysterious spell. From his hand, an extremely powerful magic beam shot out, soaring into the air, rushing straight with terrifying speed toward Abigail. Schneider, pouring all his power into his supreme spell, launched a decisive attack with the belief that this would be the moment to defeat Abigail. But misfortune still followed the hero. Abigail's devil armor once again proved its solidity that nothing could penetrate, completely undamaged by the terrible power that Schneider had just unleashed. In the moment when all hope seemed to have vanished, Abigail's face clearly showed arrogance and triumph. He was ready to open his mouth to mock his opponent. enjoying the moment of Dark Schneider's humiliation. However, just as Abigail was about to utter his mockery, Arshes suddenly appeared from above. With a majestic demeanor, she cast a similar spell, simultaneously combining with Schneider's power to create a unified attack. Two streams of supreme magic from the two most powerful wizards merged, creating a terrifying energy stream never seen before, causing the surrounding space to violently shake. The exploding thermal energy, far exceeding all predictions, burned the air and melted everything within its range. The resonance between the two powers created a terrifying reaction, making even the ground seem to shake before the wizard's fury. Under the pressure from this double attack, Abigail's devil armor began to vibrate. Each solid protective piece cracked. The invincible defense that Abigail had always been proud of gradually collapsed, threatened by an unstoppable power. The explosion created by the magic blew away everything within its influence, leaving no trace of what had once existed. Those witnessing from afar, including warriors like Metallicana and the ninjas, could not help but be amazed. They believed that the battle had ended, that this destruction must have completely eliminated Abigail. The surrounding space was quickly covered by thick clouds of dust, so hazy that no one could clearly see anything. The atmosphere became heavy and silent to the point of suffocation. Everyone held their breath waiting for the final result. A deadly stillness enveloped the battlefield, making everyone think that the battle had closed. However, right in the midst of the smoke, a cold sound rang out. It was Abigail's savage, challenging laugh. That laughter hit everyone's ears, tearing through the tense silence and then destroying the hope that had just been kindled. The hearts of the witnesses, once full of joy and optimism, suddenly fell into an abyss of despair. From within the hazy smoke covering the battlefield, Abigail's figure slowly emerged, unharmed by the terrifying attacks from Schneider and Arshes. That cunning enemy, with a sophisticated spell, had protected his body with a layer of defensive magic charm, making all attacks seem meaningless. Arrogance was clear on Abigail's face as he calmly stood there, as if this game was completely within his grasp. The magical defensive layers he used not only resisted powerful magic, but also created a feeling of invincibility, making all efforts of Schneider and his teammates seem to be stopped before an impenetrable wall. Despite his body being almost seriously destroyed, with numerous wounds and blood spreading, Schneider still slowly struggled to rise. His muscles trembled in pain but did not give up. His eyes, though tired, still blazed with an unconquerable will. Schneider's indomitable steadfastness had moved the hearts of his companions. Gara and Arshes, witnessing their hero not flinching, understood that they could not let Schneider face this powerful enemy alone. They decided not to stand outside the battle, together preparing for the final confrontation with Abigail, though knowing that the price to pay might be very high. Just as both were about to enter the battle, Yoko suddenly appeared, blocking Gara and Arshes' path. With eyes full of determination and unshakable steadfastness, Yoko persuaded them to stop, begging them to place their trust in Schneider. In her mind, not for a moment did she doubt Schneider's hidden power. She believed that no matter how seriously injured Schneider was, he could not lose to someone like Abigail. Yoko's words not only contained confidence but also carried a strong belief in Schneider's true nature, something she understood better than anyone else. Yoko's determination surprised Gara and Arshes. They were silent before her calmness and certainty. In that important moment, when everyone was tensely following the developments on the battlefield, the memory of the promise to Princess Sheila suddenly flooded back into Schneider's mind, like a sacred flame igniting a fierce fighting spirit. Despite his body being devastated to the point of almost being unable to rise, Schneider still slowly stood up straight, like a symbol of indestructible power. All physical pain seemed to disappear in an instant, leaving a bright, strong spirit in the dark night. His eyes did not waver. His trembling hands were now clenched, ready for the final battle. Those around, including powerful warriors like Gara and Arshes, could not help but be moved by Schneider's toughness and immortal will. Yoko, not just standing outside cheering, also expressed something that made Schneider burst with new hope. She declared that if Schneider won this battle, she would respond to the feelings he had had for her all along. Those words were like a flame igniting the remaining power in Schneider's body. With burning determination and desire, he was like a bolt of lightning surpassing all of Abigail's magic, moving so fast that the opponent could not keep up. With a sharp and powerful attack, he delivered a fatal blow to the enemy, causing Abigail to fall before the overwhelming power. The thick black clouds covering Metallicana throughout the battle gradually dissipated. Light poured down on the ground, bringing back a sense of peace. Everyone sighed with relief, but the joy did not last. Schneider, who had fought bravely, was now facing death as his body almost completely disintegrated. Nevertheless, everyone was moved and mourned for the hero who had sacrificed himself for a battle of justice. It seemed like this was Schneider's final moment, but contrary to all predictions, he still lived. Although only the upper half of his body remained, his indomitable spirit and humorous character remained unchanged. To everyone's astonishment, instead of enjoying the moment of victory in solemn silence, Schneider revealed his quirky side. He continuously asked Yoko to fulfill her promise despite his devastated physical condition. With a half-joking, half-serious tone, Schneider asked her to express her love right in the middle of the crowd, regardless of the astonished looks of those around. The peaceful sky that had just appeared after the long battle was suddenly covered by a gloomy gas, heralding the rebirth of the demon. From the smoking ruins, Abigail reappeared, his red eyes burning with the desire for revenge. Although his super dark form had been destroyed, he still had the devil tentacle armor intact, a formidable weapon to confront Dark Schneider, who had nearly exhausted all his power after the previous fierce battle. Outside, the two heavenly kings, Gara and Arshes, although still standing on their feet, were both enduring serious injuries. Gara, who had once fought bravely against Lick-Eddy, was now just a shadow of himself, with his right hand's ligaments too severely injured to swing a sword decisively. As for Arshes, after depleting her magical power in the battle with Abigail, she was left with only weak strength, unable to cast any more spells. This situation meant they could only watch from the outside in helplessness. Taking advantage of the opponent's weak moment, Abigail rushed in to seize the advantage. He quickly advanced and captured Yoko, pulling her out as a hostage. Each of his steps seemed to push all hope into the abyss. With Yoko in hand, Abigail knew that Dark Schneider would not dare to counterattack too decisively. Not missing the opportunity, he began to torture Schneider cruelly, delivering blows without mercy. Dark Schneider, although seriously injured and no longer at the peak of his power, still struggled to maintain his spirit. He looked at Yoko with determined eyes, but his body could no longer respond to his will. Yoko, seeing this heartbreaking scene, was devastated. Unable to bear what Schneider was enduring for her sake, she continuously begged him to let her go and focus on the battle. She knew that the fate of the entire world was in Schneider's hands, and only he could end all this tragedy. Yoko's plea was not just the voice of her heart, but also the call of the noble responsibility that Schneider carried. However, outside the battlefield, those watching were not moved by Yoko's noble love. The ministers, the powerful, and the cowardly warriors all unanimously urged Schneider to choose the right path according to common sense. They coldly emphasized that the life of one person, no matter how important, could not compare to the survival of the entire world. Sacrificing Yoko in exchange for peace for humanity was the only choice. Before the tense atmosphere and the wave of cries across the battlefield, Dark Schneider suddenly made a decision no one expected. Standing between the choice of saving the entire world or protecting the most important woman in his life, he declared resolutely that he would choose Yoko instead of the continent. This declaration rang out like a thunderbolt in clear sky, stunning all those present on the battlefield. Especially even the four heavenly kings, those who had understood the proud nature and unparalleled power of Dark Schneider, could not believe their ears. Because a powerful and arrogant person like him usually only cared about domination and power, how could he choose a lone woman instead of an entire world sinking in chaos? That bold decision not only demonstrated defiance, but also revealed the loyalty and intense love Dark Schneider had for Yoko, who had always stood by him through the most difficult and harsh days. That emotion had nurtured and formed a deep connection, far beyond all barriers of power or ambition. Realizing that Dark Schneider was still a major threat not completely eliminated, Abigail did not hesitate to decide to finish off his opponent. The deadly technique that Abigail was preparing was the pinnacle of cruelty, a fatal blow that would end Dark Schneider's life immediately. In the critical moment when death seemed inevitable, a figure suddenly appeared amid the fiery atmosphere. It was Schneider. She, with her legendary spider charm, had rushed out to block the dangerous attack, protecting Dark Schneider from the terrible assault. Just as the situation was becoming chaotic, Kaihan, quick as lightning, charged into the battle, taking advantage of that moment to rescue Yoko, along with Gara and Arshes, dear comrades who were exhausted after the long series of battles. The consecutive failures made Abigail furious. Anger like a flame burned his mind, causing him to immediately summon the dark power hidden deep within his body. Without hesitation, he activated the demonic cells, a terrible power that helped him create an immortal undead army. These bizarre creatures knew no pain, knew no fatigue, continuously attacking Dark Schneider's group. The battle became more tense than ever as the undead charged in like a fierce wave, forcing the warriors to exert all their effort to resist. Despite the excellent coordination of the members, each wave of undead was quickly eliminated. However, they continuously regenerated from the divine cells that Abigail had skillfully scattered everywhere. This put Dark Schneider's group in a dangerous situation. Each time they thought they had eliminated all the undead, they regenerated stronger than before. Recognizing the serious situation, the loyal knights of the kingdom of Metallicana and Gara's ninja society decided they could not stand by and watch anymore. They quickly joined the battle, united with Dark Schneider's group against the undead army. This unity brought a new ray of hope. As they coordinated seamlessly, each warrior plunged into battle with a high spirit of determination. However, the overwhelming number of undead was too great, making those efforts seem to be stopped before an impenetrable wall. Abigail, with his evil smile, did not stop at creating immortal undead, but he also took the battle to a new level by using demonic cells to transform the useless undead into a giant super warrior. Seeing the situation becoming too dangerous, Arshes, although exhausted after previous battles, did not hesitate to unleash the brave Thunder God, a powerful attack with the hope of destroying the enemy. However, its destructive power was too weak compared to the enormous power that Abigail had accumulated. The thunder power gradually dissipated before the thick defense of the super warrior. Then, in an instant, Abigail counterattacked with a series of continuous attacks, wiping out almost all the forces of the opposing side. Everything seemed to collapse. Even the strongest warrior, Dark Schneider, had now reached his limit. His entire body was tired and injured, seemingly no longer strong enough to stand firm. In the delirium amid destruction and despair, he made a suggestion to Schneider to combine with him to save the kingdom and those they loved. However, Dark Schneider, with an arrogant smile, flatly refused that advice. He said he would protect them because both the world and the women had belonged to him. Power and love, all were within Dark Schneider's control. The situation on the battlefield was becoming increasingly tense. When all eyes were focused on Dark Schneider, who was facing tremendous pressure from both opponents and teammates. Around him, worried shouts rang out. Everyone advised him to retreat, to save his precious life. The urging voices continuously echoed. However, no one understood Schneider's determination better than Yoko. She stood there amid countless dangers, but still strongly and firmly encouraged him. Yoko's voice was the greatest motivation. She silently conveyed that Schneider could not fall, that he needed to stand up and fight to the end. It was that solid belief from Yoko that added strength and will to Dark Schneider, helping him overcome all barriers. At that moment, fire spirits from everywhere suddenly gathered, forming a giant blazing figure, carrying explosive elemental power within. Energy from the fire element merged, creating a defensive armor layer. Although temporary, it was extremely solid. Thanks to this power, Dark Schneider could easily neutralize all attacks from the super warriors controlled by Abigail. That bright flame was like a lighthouse guiding in the dark night, causing the spirit of the comrade warriors to be strongly awakened. They took it as inspiration to continue fighting. While Dark Schneider began to summon magic to prepare for the decisive attack, Abigail, cunning, immediately recognized the opportunity when seeing Dark Schneider concentrating. He immediately ordered the giant super warriors under his command to attack quickly, taking advantage of the moment when Schneider was reciting the spell. However, the powerful protection from the fire demon Ifrit had made all of Abigail's calculations useless. Ifrit, with invincible power from the fire realm, had completely neutralized the dangerous attacks from the enemy, making the super warriors' efforts useless. Schneider, not stopping there, continued to demonstrate his dark magic power. Taking advantage of the terrible power of the Exodus technique, an extremely powerful spell capable of drawing energy from deep within the fire realm, Schneider released extreme heat, strong enough to blow away even the most powerful creatures. Immediately, the giant super warrior was thrown up and disappeared in smoke, returning to where they originally belonged, Hell, where dark creatures could never escape. After eliminating the biggest threat, Dark Schneider did not waste time, quickly turning toward Abigail. His speed was beyond imagination, making Abigail, though wise and cunning, unable to react in time. Continuous, powerful punches like thunder struck directly into the enemy's body. Abigail, no longer able to dodge, was continuously pressured. Each of Schneider's blows was like a lightning bolt striking powerfully on his body, crushing one part after another. When the battle seemed to be coming to an end, Dark Schneider felt a strong urge within himself. With a determined face, he drew the magic sword, a weapon containing unparalleled power that only a true warrior could master. The sword gleamed like a shooting star flashing through space at an unimaginable speed. Schneider rushed straight into Abigail. The sword emitted a dazzling light, piercing straight through the opponent's defense. The attack was so powerful that Abigail's body was pushed back, pinned to a giant rock behind, as if the sword had sealed the evil one right there. In that moment, the battlefield became strangely silent. The warriors who had fought alongside Dark Schneider, the knights and ninjas still panting after the tense battle, were amazed by the leader's mighty victory. Schneider, with pride and satisfaction in his heart, turned back to look for Yoko, the one he had chosen to protect, the one for whom he had chosen love. He intended to share the glorious moment with her when suddenly a strange feeling invaded him. A chill spread throughout his body, making his spine freeze. The atmosphere around seemed to be covered by darkness, heavy and cold. Dark Schneider's eyes immediately turned to where Abigail had been defeated. He was stunned to see the unimaginable happening. Abigail, who seemed to have been completely killed, was slowly rising from the ruins. Although his body had been seriously damaged, broken, and full of blood, he still emitted a dark, bizarre gas. That dark energy seemed not to come from this world, but was an evil power from another dimension, terrible and unpredictable. His eyes burned with the flame of unquenchable hatred, as if every cell in his body contained deep hatred for Dark Schneider and everything he represented. The warriors around clearly felt this frightening transformation. All were stunned in horror. No one dared to step forward. No one dared to approach the one returning from hell. Witnessing this scene, Yoko, who had always silently observed the battle and knew well the approaching danger, decided she could not wait any longer. She understood that Abigail's presence in this state was an unprecedented threat. If not acted upon immediately, not only Dark Schneider but the entire world could be destroyed. With determined eyes, she did not think much about herself anymore. For her, protecting the man she loved was more important than anything. In an instant, Yoko rushed straight toward Abigail. Although her body was weak before the opponent's power, the determination in her mind was stronger than ever. Yoko's run carried all the sacrifice and love she had for Dark Schneider. She did not need a supreme spell, nor did she possess an extraordinary power, but her will was like an inextinguishable flame. Each of Yoko's steps was directed toward a single goal, the large rock on the nearby cliff where she could use to decisively end Abigail's life. Yoko's plan was bold and dangerous. She knew that only by pulling Abigail down into the deep abyss could his terrible power be completely eliminated. Her heart only thought about protecting Dark Schneider and everyone around from the impending disaster, accepting the sacrifice of her life to bring safety to those she loved. Before dying, Abigail activated the self-destruct mode. A terrible explosion occurred. The sound of the explosion echoed across the sky, causing the earth and heaven to shake, creating an extremely strong shock wave. The entire kingdom of Metallicana, where this bloody battle took place, was swept away in a sea of fire and ashes. Rocks shattered. The world was filled with smoke and fire, wiping out all traces of life that had once existed. Those who witnessed the scene that day were swept away by that destructive power. Metallicana, the powerful kingdom, now only remained in the memory of the survivors. But no one knew if anyone survived after that terrible explosion. Among the survivors, only one army belonging to the rebellion remained intact. That was the first army led by Kansu, one of the 4 heavenly kings. Now Kansu became the most powerful dark force left. There was no one in this world with enough power to stop his expansion. He now stood at the pinnacle of power. But the price of destruction was too high, leaving a world plunged into chaos and loss. On that fateful night when Metallicana disappeared from the world map, in a distant village called the Hidden Village, also known as the Samurai Village, the villagers discovered a young girl, her body covered in blood, gasping amid panic. It was Yoko, the only survivor. Her eyes were full of fear and panic, but her mouth continuously urgently begged the villagers to save the life of someone named Lucian.